The eviction notice came on the same day the hospital called about Ellie's blood work. Mason Carter sat on the apartment floor with his 4-year-old daughter asleep on his lap, staring at numbers that didn't add up no matter how many times he recalculated. Rent, overdue. Medical bills, mounting. Custody hearing, 3 weeks away. His phone buzzed, a voicemail from his ex-wife's lawyer, voice dripping with confidence. "Mr. Carter, we need to discuss your living situation and its impact on Ellie's well-being." He pressed delete. Then he did something he'd sworn he'd never do. He opened the email from the stranger who'd offered him a way out. If you want to see how far desperation can push a good man, and whether love can grow from a lie, stay until the end. Hit like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the hospital billing office made everything look sickly and washed out, which seemed fitting. Mason sat in the plastic chair with Ellie fidgeting beside him, her tiny hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers. She was humming something off-key, oblivious to the conversation happening across the desk. "Mr. Carter, we've been more than patient." The billing coordinator, Karen, according to her name tag, didn't sound patient at all. She sounded tired. "Ellie's treatment can't continue without payment arrangements. We're talking about medication she needs regularly. This isn't optional." "I know." Mason's jaw was tight. "I'm working on it." "Working on it how?" Karen folded her hands on the desk. Not unkindly, but not sympathetically either. Just business. "You said that 6 weeks ago. The balance is now $4,200. If you can't provide insurance information or a payment plan by Friday..." "I said I'm working on it." His voice came out harder than he meant. Ellie stopped humming and looked up at him with those big worried eyes that gutted him every single time. Karen's expression softened slightly. "I have a daughter too. I get it. But my hands are tied here." Mason stood, scooping Ellie up onto his hip even though she was getting too big for it. His back would ache later. Everything ached lately. "Friday. I'll have something by Friday." He had no idea what. Outside, the autumn air bit through his jacket. Ellie buried her face in his neck, her breath warm against his skin. "Daddy, are you mad?" "No, baby. Not at you. Never at you." "At the lady?" "At the situation." He buckled her into the car seat that had seen better days, the straps fraying at the edges. "Sometimes grown-up stuff is complicated." "Mommy says you're bad at complicated stuff." His hand froze on the buckle. "When did Mommy say that?" Ellie's eyes went wide, that look that meant she'd said something she wasn't supposed to. On the phone. She didn't know I was listening." Mason forced his breathing to stay even. "What else did Mommy say?" "That I should live with her and Marcus because they have a big house and you only have apartment." She pronounced it carefully, the way kids do when they're repeating words they don't fully understand. "What's wrong with our apartment?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Absolutely nothing." He kissed her forehead and closed the door, then stood there for a moment with his hand pressed against the car roof, eyes closed. Rebecca, his ex-wife. The woman who'd walked out when Ellie was 18 months old because motherhood was suffocating her potential. Who'd moved across the state with her new boyfriend Marcus, a financial advisor with a McMansion and a boat. Who hadn't asked for custody then, but was suddenly very interested now that Ellie was old enough to be convenient instead of constant work. The custody hearing was in 3 weeks. Rebecca's lawyer had made it very clear that Mason's financial instability would be front and center. A 1-bedroom apartment, a job that barely covered expenses, medical bills he couldn't pay. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but these days he couldn't afford to miss calls. "Mason Carter?" Speaking. "This is Todd Vance from Landlord Property Management. I'm calling about Unit 7B. Mason's stomach dropped. "I told your office I'd have rent by the 5th. That's tomorrow." "That's what you said last month too, Mr. Carter. I'm sorry, but we're moving forward with eviction proceedings. You'll receive formal notice today." "Wait, just give me 1 more week. I'm getting paid Friday and I can..." "We've given you 3 extensions. It's out of my hands now. I'm sorry." Todd didn't sound sorry. He sounded like he'd made this call 100 times before. "You'll have 30 days to vacate." The line went dead. Mason stood in the hospital parking lot, watching cars come and go, normal people dealing with normal problems. A woman argued with someone on her phone about dinner plans. A man in scrubs jogged toward the entrance, coffee in hand. their lives continuing, undisturbed. His was falling apart. He got in the car, drove, let Ellie chatter about a cartoon she'd watched at the neighbor's apartment while he'd been at work. She didn't notice he wasn't really responding, or maybe she did and was trying to fill the silence anyway, the way she'd learned to do over the past year. "Can we get chicken nuggets?" "Not tonight, Elle." "But you said maybe yesterday." "I said we'd see. That's not the same as yes." Her bottom lip trembled. He felt like the worst person alive. "How about grilled cheese at home?" He tried to make it sound like an adventure. "Extra cheese, the way you like." She considered this. "Okay, but can we have the good bread?" The good bread. White bread instead of the wheat that was on sale. "Sure, baby." They didn't have the good bread. They'd have whatever was in the pantry, which was probably half a loaf of wheat and some crackers. But he'd worry about that when they got home. The apartment was exactly as depressing as he'd left it that morning. Dishes in the sink because the dishwasher had broken 2 months ago and the landlord never fixed it. Laundry in a basket because the building's machines ate quarters and he'd been rationing them. Ellie's toys scattered across the living room floor because she was 4 and he was too exhausted to stay on top of everything. He made grilled cheese with the heels of the wheat bread and the last 3 slices of American cheese. Ellie ate without complaint while he stood at the counter, scrolling through his email on his cracked phone screen. Bills. Rejection from a loan application. A job listing that wanted skills he didn't have. Spam about crypto. And then, an email from 3 days ago that he'd almost deleted without reading because the subject line sounded insane. Proposal. Mutual benefit arrangement. He'd opened it out of curiosity. Some kind of scam, probably. But it wasn't. "Mr. Carter, you don't know me, but I know of your situation through mutual acquaintances. I understand you're facing financial and legal challenges that threaten your custody of your daughter. I find myself in a different but equally difficult position. I'm prepared to offer you financial stability and legal support in exchange for a specific arrangement. This is not a loan. This is a contract. If you're interested in discussing this further, meet me at Pearson's Coffee on 4th Street tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone. Bring nothing but an open mind. A.B." He'd thought about it for maybe 10 seconds before deleting it. Clearly a scam, or worse. But then the eviction notice had arrived, and the hospital had called, and Rebecca's lawyer had left that smug voicemail. He'd pulled the email out of trash at 11 p.m. that night, sitting in the dark while Ellie slept, and read it 17 times looking for the angle. There was always an angle. But what did he have left to lose? The next morning, he'd dropped Ellie at preschool, thank God for the subsidized program, and driven to Pearson's Coffee. Sat in a corner booth. Waited. She arrived exactly at 10 a.m. Mason didn't know what he'd been expecting. Someone older, maybe. Severe. The kind of person who sent cryptic emails about contracts. Aria Blake was none of those things. She was young, mid-20s probably, polished in a way that spoke of money, perfect hair, expensive coat, boots that cost more than his rent. But her eyes were sharp, assessing. She slid into the booth across from him without preamble. "Mason Carter?" "That's me." "Aria Blake?" No handshake. She set a slim leather portfolio on the table between them. "You came. Good. That means you're desperate enough to listen." "I'm not desperate." The lie came automatically. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Everyone who sits down at this table is desperate, Mr. Carter. Let's not waste time pretending otherwise." He should have walked out. Would have, if his phone hadn't buzzed with another past due notice right then. Aria noticed. Of course she did. "I'll be direct. I need a husband. You need money and legal protection. I'm proposing a contractual marriage, 12 months. Renewable if necessary." Mason stared at her. "You're insane." "I'm practical." She opened the portfolio, slid a sheet of paper across the table. "My family is pressuring me into an arranged marriage with a business associate I have no interest in. If I'm already married, that problem disappears. You get financial support, legal representation for your custody case, and housing. This is..." He didn't even have words. "This is illegal. It's a marriage, completely legal. The motivations are our business. It's fraud. Only if we get caught." She leaned back, studying him. "You have a daughter who needs medical care you can't afford. An ex-wife with expensive lawyers who wants to take her away. An eviction notice that'll make you look unstable in court. I'm offering you a solution. Why me? You have something I need. A believable story. Single father, working class, no connections to my family's world. If I married someone from my social circle, everyone would know it was a setup. But you? She gestured at him, not unkindly. You're perfect, no offense. Plenty taken. You're also honest, according to my research. Good father, hard worker. The kind of man who wouldn't take advantage of the situation. Her eyes locked on his. Am I wrong? Mason's head was spinning. This is insane. You can't just... People don't do this. People do this all the time. They just don't call it what it is. She pulled out another document. Here's what I'm offering. Immediate payment of all outstanding debts. Medical, rent, utilities. Monthly stipend of $5,000. A 2-bedroom apartment in a good school district, fully furnished. Full legal representation for your custody case, including a retainer with Whitmore and Associates. Whitmore and Associates, the firm that had eviscerated Rebecca's first lawyer. In exchange, Arya continued, you marry me. We live together, present as a couple in public when necessary. Keep up appearances with my family and at social functions. Everything documented, everything professional, separate bedrooms, no expectations beyond the contract. For 12 months, or until the arrangement no longer serves us both. Whichever comes first. She pulled out a pen. I'm not asking you to decide right now. Take the contract, read it, think about Ellie. That last part landed exactly as she'd intended. This is crazy, he said again, but his hand was already reaching for the papers. Crazy would be losing your daughter because you were too proud to accept help. Arya stood, buttoning her coat. You have 48 hours. After that, I move on to other options. She'd left him there with a stack of legal documents and a coffee that had gone cold. That was yesterday. Now, standing in his apartment with Ellie's laughter drifting from the living room where she was watching cartoons, Mason pulled the contract from his jacket pocket. He'd read it so many times he had sections memorized. Clause 3.2. Financial obligations of Party B, Arya Blake, include but are not limited to immediate clearance of Party A's outstanding debts, not to exceed $50,000, monthly stipend of $5,000 for duration of contract, provision of suitable housing. Clause 7.1. Either party may terminate this agreement with 30 days written notice, provided all financial obligations through termination date are met. Clause 9.4. In the event of romantic or sexual relationship development between parties, all terms of this contract remain in effect unless mutually amended. That last one had made him laugh when he'd first read it, like that was something he needed to worry about. This was a business arrangement, a transaction, but it was also a lifeline. His phone buzzed. Rebecca. We need to talk about Ellie's future. Marcus and I have been discussing the hearing. There are things you should know. He stared at the message, felt the familiar anger rise and then settle into something harder. Determination. He pulled up Arya's number, which she'd included at the bottom of the contract. I'm in. When do we start? The response came within seconds. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Bring Ellie. She should meet me before we make this official. Mason looked at his daughter, sprawled on the worn couch with her stuffed rabbit, completely unaware that her father was about to marry a stranger to keep their life from completely falling apart. Elle, come here for a second. She bounced over, rabbit dangling from one hand. What? How would you feel about moving to a new apartment? A bigger one. Her eyes went huge. With 2 bedrooms? Yeah, with your own room. Can I paint it pink? Despite everything, he smiled. We'll see. Is it because of Mommy's lawyers? His smile faded. No, it's because Daddy found a way to make things better. Okay. She hugged him around the legs, then bounced back to the couch, crisis averted in the way only a 4-year-old could manage. Mason looked at the contract one more time. At the signature line at the bottom, blank and waiting. He thought about Ellie's medical appointments, the bills, the eviction notice, Rebecca's smug lawyer, the look on his daughter's face when she'd asked if he was mad. He thought about Arya Blake's cold assessment. You're desperate enough to listen. She'd been right. He signed. Wotat. The law offices of Chen and Partners were the kind of place that made Mason feel like he was tracking dirt everywhere he walked, even though his shoes were clean. Marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than his car, a receptionist who looked at him like she could smell the poverty on him. Ellie clung to his hand, unusually quiet. "We're here to see Arya Blake," Mason said. "Ms. Blake is expecting you. Conference room B." The receptionist gestured down a hallway without looking up from her computer. Conference room B was all glass walls and leather chairs. Arya was already there, along with two other people, a severe-looking woman in her 50s with glasses on a chain, and a younger man in an expensive suit who radiated lawyer energy. Arya stood when they entered. Her expression shifted when she saw Ellie. Something softened, just for a moment, before the professional mask returned. "Mason, thank you for coming." She crouched down to Ellie's level. "You must be Ellie. I've heard a lot about you." Ellie pressed closer to Mason's leg. "Daddy says we're getting a new apartment." "That's right, with your own bedroom. Pink, I hear?" Ellie nodded, still wary but interested. Arya smiled, genuine this time. "I had a pink room when I was your age. Drove my parents crazy." She straightened, gesturing to the others. "This is Margaret Chen, who will be handling the legal aspects of our arrangement, and David Roth, who will be representing you in the custody matter." David extended his hand. Mason shook it, feeling off balance. This was really happening. "Mr. Carter," David said, "I've reviewed your case file. We have a lot of work to do, but it's not insurmountable. Rebecca Harding's petition relies heavily on your financial instability and housing situation. Once we address those factors, which we're doing today," Margaret cut in. She had the kind of voice that made people sit up straight. "I've drafted the marriage contract, which both parties will review and sign. I've also prepared the financial documents, debt clearance, stipend account setup, housing lease in both names." Mason's head was spinning again. "This is moving really fast." "We don't have time for slow," Arya said. "Your hearing is in 3 weeks. We need everything in place before then." She glanced at Ellie, then back at him. "But first, we should talk. Privately." Margaret nodded. "I'll take Ellie to see the office aquarium. Would you like that, sweetheart?" Ellie looked at Mason for permission. He nodded, even though letting his daughter out of his sight in this situation felt wrong on every level. When they were alone, Arya sat across from him, hands folded on the table. Professional, controlled. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "About 100 of them. Name one." "This is going to mess up Ellie. She's already confused about her mom leaving, and now I'm bringing a stranger into her life and calling her, what, my wife? How is that going to work?" "Honestly," Arya's directness caught him off guard. "We tell her an age-appropriate version of the truth. We're friends who are helping each other. We're going to live together for a while. Kids are more adaptable than you think." "You have kids?" "No, but I was one. My parents' marriage was a business arrangement too. They just didn't admit it until I was old enough to notice." Something bitter crossed her face. "At least we're being upfront about it." Mason studied her. "Why are you really doing this? It can't just be about avoiding some arranged marriage. You're clearly smart enough to find another way out." "There is no other way out." Her voice went flat. "My family, my father specifically, has very specific ideas about my future. Who I should marry, what I should do with my life, the business I should help run. If I refuse directly, I lose access to my trust fund, my position in the company, everything I've worked for. So get a job somewhere else." "It's not that simple. My father has reach, connections. He'd make sure I couldn't work anywhere that mattered." She met his eyes. "I know how this sounds. Poor little rich girl complaining about her problems. But I've spent my whole life being told what to do, who to be. This is the only leverage I have. If I'm already married, the arrangement with—" She stopped herself. "With the person they've chosen becomes impossible." "Who is he?" "The guy they want you to marry. Someone who'll keep me under control. That's all that matters to them." She straightened. "But that's my problem. Your problem is keeping Ellie. So, are we doing this or not?" Mason thought about his daughter, probably pressing her face against an aquarium glass somewhere in this building, delighted by fish she'd never seen before. About the medical bills and the eviction notice and Rebecca's lawyers circling. "Yeah, we're doing this." Arya's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good. Then let's go over the rules." Well, the apartment Arya had arranged was in a part of the city Mason usually only drove through on his way to somewhere else. Tree-lined streets, actual yards. A building with a doorman who nodded politely when they pulled up in Mason's beat-up Honda. "This can't be right," Mason said, staring at the address on his phone. It's right. Arya was in the passenger seat, looking perfectly comfortable in her expensive coat. In the back, Ellie was asleep, exhausted from the day's events. The doorman opened Arya's door. Ms. Blake, welcome home. Thank you, Richard. This is Mason Carter and his daughter, Ellie. They'll be living here as well. If Richard found this arrangement strange, his face didn't show it. Of course. I'll have your parking spot reassigned, Mr. Carter. A parking spot. Mason almost laughed. The apartment was on the 4th floor. 2 bedrooms, just like Arya had promised, but that barely captured it. Hardwood floors. Updated kitchen. Living room with actual space to move. Windows that weren't painted shut. Ellie woke up when he carried her inside. She looked around with wide eyes. Is this ours? For now, Mason said, because he couldn't bring himself to lie completely. Your room is this way. Arya led them down a short hallway. I had it set up based on what Margaret's assistant told me about your interests. If you don't like it, we can change it. She opened the door. The room was pink. Not overwhelmingly pink, but enough. There was a bed with a canopy, shelves already stocked with books and toys, a small desk, a rug that looked soft enough to sleep on. Ellie gasped. It's like a princess room. Do you like it? Arya asked, and Mason heard something tentative in her voice, like she actually cared about the answer. I love it. Ellie ran to the bed, climbing up and bouncing. Daddy, look! I see, baby. His throat was tight. Arya stepped back. Your room is across the hall. I'm down at the end. Bathroom is shared, but I'm usually up early, so we shouldn't overlap much. The efficiency of it stung a little, like she was already establishing boundaries, making sure he knew this wasn't real, which it wasn't. He needed to remember that. Thank you, he said. For this. For all of it. It's a business arrangement, no thanks necessary. But her eyes flicked to Ellie, still bouncing on the bed, and something in her expression shifted. She's a good kid. The best. Then let's make sure she stays with you. Tut. The first week was surreal. Mason went to work at the warehouse where he'd been picking up shifts for the past year, except now he had David Roth's card in his wallet and knew his bills were paid. He came home to an apartment that didn't smell like mildew. He made dinner in a kitchen with appliances that actually worked. Ellie adapted faster than he'd expected. She called Arya Miss Arya and seemed thrilled to have a grown-up woman around who wasn't her mother, who asked her about her day and helped with puzzles and didn't make everything feel heavy. Arya was good with her, patient, which surprised Mason, given how cold she'd been in that first meeting. You're staring, Arya said one evening. They were in the living room, Ellie asleep in her pink room, the two of them on opposite ends of the couch like roommates who barely knew each other. Sorry, just trying to figure you out. Don't. She didn't look up from her laptop. This works better if we keep it simple. Hard to keep it simple when we're supposed to be married. Legally married, not actually married. She finally met his eyes. We have appearances to keep up. My family is expecting to meet you next week. They'll ask questions. We need our story straight. What story? How we met. How we fell in love. She said it like she was describing a grocery list. Keep it vague. We met through mutual friends, took things slow. You weren't looking for anything serious after your divorce, but I changed your mind. I was drawn to your dedication as a father. Is any of that true? The last part could be. She closed her laptop. You're a good father, Mason. That's not something I need to fake. The compliment caught him off guard. Thanks. It's an observation, not flattery. But her expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I meant what I said about Ellie. She's great. You've done well with her. I'm trying. It shows. They sat in silence for a moment. The kind that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't hostile either. Your family, Mason said. What should I expect? Arya's jaw tightened. My father is controlling and ruthless. My mother is checked out. My brother thinks I'm being selfish by refusing the arrangement they set up. She paused. They're going to hate you, not because of who you are, but because you represent me choosing something for myself. Great. Can't wait. I'll handle them. You just need to be yourself. She stood, gathering her laptop. Good night, Mason. Night. She paused at the hallway entrance. And Mason, don't try to figure me out. It's easier that way. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with the sound of city traffic filtering through windows that actually kept the cold out. The Blake family dinner was held at a restaurant that didn't have prices on the menu, which told Mason everything he needed to know about how the evening would go. He'd borrowed a suit from David, ill-fitting, but better than anything he owned. Arya had looked him over before they left the apartment, adjusting his tie with the kind of clinical precision that reminded him this was all performance. "Remember," she'd said, "we're in love. Disgustingly, inconveniently in love. Don't oversell it, but don't undersell it either." Any other impossible instructions? She'd almost smiled. "Just follow my lead." Now they sat at a table with three people who looked at Mason like he was something tracked in on someone's shoe. Arya's father, Richard Blake, was exactly what Mason had pictured. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of handshake that crushed fingers to establish dominance. Her mother, Catherine, barely acknowledged his presence beyond a thin smile. The brother, Connor, looked like a younger, smugger version of their father. "So," Richard said, cutting his steak with surgical precision, "you're the man who swept my daughter off her feet." "I wouldn't say swept," Mason said, "more like stumbled into each other's lives." Arya's hand found his under the table. A warning squeeze. How charmingly humble. Richard's tone suggested it was anything but charming. "Arya tells me you work in logistics?" "Warehouse operations, yeah. And you have a daughter from a previous marriage." "Ellie, she's 4. Catherine finally spoke. "How difficult, raising a child alone." "We manage." "I'm sure you do." She sipped her wine. "It must be quite a change moving into Arya's apartment, a significant upgrade from your previous situation." There it was. The implication. Mason felt his spine stiffen, but Arya spoke before he could. "Actually, Mom, it's our apartment now, and Mason's been great with the transition. Ellie loves her new room." "I'm sure she does." Richard set down his fork. "Forgive my directness, Mr. Carter, but this all seems rather sudden. My daughter has never mentioned you, and suddenly you're married?" "We kept things private," Arya said. "Given your feelings about my personal life, it seemed simpler." "Simpler," Connor laughed. "That's one word for it." "What's another word, Connor?" Arya's voice had gone sharp. "Convenient." Connor leaned back. "You've been fighting Dad's arrangement for months, and suddenly you show up married to some guy none of us have ever heard of. Seems pretty convenient timing. Are you suggesting this isn't real?" Arya's hand tightened on Mason's. "I'm suggesting it's worth questioning." Richard raised a hand. "Connor, enough." He turned his attention back to Mason. "My daughter is headstrong, independent to a fault. If she's found someone who makes her happy, then I suppose we should be supportive." It sounded like support. It felt like a threat. "Thank you, Daddy." Arya's voice was sugar-sweet and completely fake. The rest of the dinner passed in tense small talk. Catherine asked vapid questions about wedding plans they hadn't had. Connor made subtle digs. Richard watched Mason like he was waiting for him to slip up. In the car afterward, Arya was silent. "That went well," Mason tried. "They know." "Know what?" "That this is fake. Connor definitely knows. He's probably already digging into your background." She stared out the window. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. Maybe we should—" "We can't back out now. The custody hearing is in 2 weeks. If we fall apart before then, Rebecca's lawyers will use it against you." She looked at him. "We have to hold this together, no matter what my family does." Mason thought about Ellie, safe in their apartment with the babysitter Arya had vetted and paid for, about the medical bills that were finally paid, about having a fighting chance in court. "Okay," he said. "We hold it together." Arya nodded, then went back to staring out the window. Neither of them spoke the rest of the way home. 2 weeks later, Mason stood in a courthouse conference room while David Roth went over last-minute strategy. Ellie was with Arya, another thing that had become normal somehow, the way Arya had slipped into their lives like she'd always been there. "Rebecca's team is going to push hard on stability," David said. "But we've got documentation of your improved living situation, your financial stability, character witnesses. We're in good shape." Good shape didn't feel like enough when his daughter's future was on the line. The hearing was brutal. Rebecca's lawyer, a shark named Patricia Morgan, painted Mason as irresponsible, unstable, barely scraping by. She brought up every late payment, every missed appointment, every scrape of evidence that he was struggling. Mr. Carter recently entered into a marriage, Patricia said, just weeks before this hearing. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Objection? David was on his feet. Miss Morgan is implying impropriety without evidence. I'm establishing a pattern of instability, Patricia countered. Mr. Carter's life has been chaos. Now suddenly he's married to a woman with significant financial resources, living in an apartment he couldn't afford on his own. This court needs to consider whether this arrangement is genuine or simply a strategic move to appear more stable. The mediator looked at Mason. Mr. Carter, can you speak to your relationship with your current wife? Mason thought about Aria's rules, about keeping it professional, about the contract sitting in a locked drawer at home. Then he thought about Ellie. Aria and I met 6 months ago. The lie came easier than he'd expected. We took things slow because I had Ellie to think about, but she's been nothing but supportive. She cares about my daughter. She's helped us build a stable home. That's real, no matter what Ms. Morgan wants to imply. Patricia smiled like a predator. 6 months, yet none of your friends or family knew about her until recently. We kept our relationship private. How convenient, David cut in. Your Honor, Miss Morgan is badgering the witness. Mr. Carter's marriage is legal and legitimate. His improved circumstances benefit Ellie, which should be this court's primary concern. The mediator made a note. Agreed. Ms. Morgan, move on. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Rebecca testified about how much better equipped she was to provide for Ellie. Marcus talked about their stable home and his financial planning expertise. They painted a picture of perfection. David countered with Mason's work history, his dedication, testimonials from Ellie's teachers and doctors about what a good father he was. In the end, the mediator looked tired. I'll have a decision within 2 weeks. Both parties will be notified. 2 weeks. 2 more weeks of not knowing if he'd lose his daughter. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca caught up with him. Mason, wait! He didn't want to, but he stopped. She looked the same as always, beautiful in that careful way she'd perfected. I'm not trying to hurt you. Could have fooled me. I'm trying to do what's best for Ellie. She deserves stability. She has stability. She has me. She has you barely keeping your head above water. Rebecca's voice softened. I know you love her. I'm not questioning that. But love isn't enough. She needs more than you can give her on your own. I'm not on my own anymore. Your convenient new wife? Rebecca's expression turned pitying. Come on, Mason. We both know what that is. You don't know anything about it. I know you. I know you're desperate. And desperate people make stupid choices. She touched his arm. He pulled away. Just think about it. Really think about what's best for Ellie. Not your pride. Her. She walked away, leaving him standing there feeling gutted. His phone buzzed. Aria, how did it go? Don't know yet. 2 weeks for a decision. Come home. I made dinner. Home. When had he started thinking of that apartment as home? When he got there, Ellie launched herself at him. Daddy, Miss Aria made mac and cheese, the good kind. Did she? Aria was in the kitchen, looking domestic in a way that felt wrong and right at the same time. Hope you don't mind. Ellie said it was your favorite. It is. He set Ellie down, watched her run back to the living room where her toys were scattered. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She handed him a beer. Bad day? Long day. Want to talk about it? That was new. They'd been living together for a month, maintaining their professional distance, keeping everything surface level. Rebecca thinks this is all fake, he said. The marriage? She's probably right. Aria's expression shifted. It's not fake, it's just unconventional. That's a nice way of putting it. Mason, she stopped, started again. You're a good father. Whatever the mediator decides, that doesn't change. Doesn't help if I lose her. You won't. She said it with such certainty. I won't let that happen. He looked at her, really looked, saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before, something that looked almost like she meant it. Why do you care? The question came out rougher than he intended. This is just business to you. It was business. Her voice was quiet. But Ellie, she broke off, glancing toward the living room where Ellie was singing to herself. She's a good kid, and you're trying. That matters. Arya, don't. She moved away, putting distance between them. The mac and cheese is getting cold. Let's eat. She was right. The mac and cheese was getting cold. But something else was warming up, and neither of them knew what to do about it. The decision came on a Tuesday. Mason was at work, stacking pallets in the warehouse, when his phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Mason Carter. Mason, it's David. The mediator's ruling just came through. Mason's heart stopped. Around him, forklifts beeped and workers shouted, and the world kept moving, oblivious. And? You retain primary custody. Rebecca gets supervised visitation every other weekend, with the option to petition for unsupervised after 6 months if she demonstrates consistent involvement. The relief hit him so hard he had to lean against a stack of boxes. Are you serious? The mediator cited your improved living situation, financial stability, and Ellie's clear attachment to you as primary factors. Rebecca's team tried to push the marriage angle, but ultimately the evidence showed you've created a stable home environment. David paused. You did it, Mason. She stays with you. Mason closed his eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank Arya, too. Her legal support made a difference. David's voice softened. Enjoy this, Mason. You earned it. After they hung up, Mason stood there in the warehouse for a full minute, just breathing. Workers moved around him, completely unaware that his entire world had just shifted on its axis. Ellie was his. Legally, officially his. He pulled up Arya's number, fingers still trembling. We won. Her response came immediately. I know, David called me first, congratulations. Then a moment later, come home early. This deserves celebrating. Home. There was that word again. His supervisor wasn't happy about him leaving 2 hours early, but Mason didn't care. He drove too fast, his mind racing. He needed to pick up Ellie from preschool, needed to see her face, needed to hold her and know she was staying. When he got to Little Learners Academy, she was on the playground, pushing another kid on the swing, completely oblivious to the legal battle that had been raging around her. Ellie! She turned, face lighting up. Daddy, you're early. Special day. He scooped her up, held her maybe too tight. She squirmed, but didn't complain. How come? Because I love you. That's how come. She patted his cheek with her small hand. I love you too. Can we get ice cream? Yeah, baby, we can get ice cream. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Mason let her pick whatever flavor she wanted. Ended up with chocolate chip cookie dough and rainbow sherbet, which was going to be a horrifying combination, but he didn't care. He grabbed a bottle of wine for Arya, something that looked expensive because nothing else felt adequate. When they got to the apartment, Arya was already there. She'd left work early too, apparently. There were balloons, actual balloons, tied to the back of the dining chairs, and she'd ordered food from somewhere that smelled incredible. Miss Arya! Ellie ran to her, ice cream forgotten. Look what Daddy got me! Arya crouched down, examining the ice cream containers with appropriate seriousness. That's quite a selection. Very sophisticated palate. What's palate? It means you have good taste. Arya smiled, then looked up at Mason. Her eyes were bright. Congratulations. Couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. You're her father. That was always going to matter most. But she looked pleased anyway. I just helped level the playing field. Ellie tugged on Arya's sleeve. Can we have the ice cream now? After dinner, I ordered Thai food. I hope that's okay? Mason set the wine on the counter. It's perfect. They ate at the dining table, all three of them, which had become routine but still felt strange. Ellie chattered about her day, about a girl named Sophie who'd shared her crackers, about how Mrs. Chen had read them a story about a bear. Normal kid stuff. The kind of stuff that felt miraculous right now. Arya listened with genuine interest, asking questions, engaging in a way that felt natural. She'd gotten good at this over the past month, being part of their life. Or maybe she'd always been good at it and just hadn't had the opportunity. After dinner, Ellie got her ice cream, a truly disgusting bowl of chocolate chip cookie dough mixed with rainbow sherbet, and planted herself in front of the TV for her allotted screen time. Mason poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to Arya. To winning, he said. To keeping your daughter. She clinked her glass against his. Took a sip, watching him over the rim. How does it feel? Like I can breathe for the first time in months. He leaned against the counter. I was terrified I was going to lose her. That Rebecca and her perfect life with Marcus would look better on paper. They might have looked better on paper, but Ellie's not a paper case. She's a real kid who needs her real father. Arya set down her glass. The mediator saw that. Thanks to you. Mason, stop thanking me. We had a deal. I held up my end. It feels like more than a deal now. The words hung between them. Arya's expression shifted, something guarded sliding into place. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't make this complicated. She moved toward the living room, putting distance between them again, the way she always did when things got too close to real. We have an arrangement. It's working. Let's not mess it up by getting confused about what this is. What if I'm not confused? She stopped, didn't turn around. Mason, you've been living with us for over a month. You help with Ellie. You care about what happens to us. That's not just business. It's exactly business. I needed a husband to avoid my family's arrangement. You needed financial support for your custody case. We're both getting what we need. Are you? He moved closer, not touching, but close enough to see the tension in her shoulders. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're running from something, and I don't think it's just an arranged marriage. Arya turned then, eyes flashing. You don't know anything about my life. So tell me, why? So we can pretend this is real? So we can play house and forget that there's a contract with an expiration date sitting in your drawer? Her voice was sharp now, defensive. This works because we both know what it is. The second we start pretending it's something else, it falls apart. Maybe it's already something else and you're too scared to admit it. I'm not scared. I'm practical. But her hands were shaking slightly. She shoved them in her pockets. This arrangement has a purpose, for both of us. Don't ruin it by catching feelings. Too late. The confession landed between them like a grenade. Arya stared at him. What? I said too late. Mason ran a hand through his hair. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you set up Ellie's room without being asked. Maybe when you showed up to that awful dinner with my family and didn't flinch. Maybe it's just been happening this whole time and I was too focused on the custody case to notice. But it's there, Arya, and I think you feel it too. You're wrong. Am I? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked toward the living room where Ellie was absorbed in her cartoon, ice cream smeared on her face. This can't happen, Arya said finally. We can't do this. Why not? Because when this ends, and it will end, someone gets hurt. Probably Ellie. Definitely you. Maybe even me. She shook her head. I'm not good at this, Mason. Relationships, commitment. My longest relationship was 8 months and ended because I couldn't let anyone actually in. This? She gestured between them. This was supposed to be simple. Life's not simple. You of all people should know that. Which is exactly why we need rules. Boundaries. But she didn't sound convinced anymore. I can't be what you need. You already are. Before she could argue, Ellie called from the living room. Daddy, Miss Arya, come watch. The princess is singing. The moment broke. Arya pulled back, walls slamming into place. I need some air, she said. I'll be back later. She grabbed her coat and left before he could stop her. Mason stood in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, feeling like he'd just detonated whatever fragile piece they'd built. Ellie appeared in the doorway. Where'd Miss Arya go? Just for a walk, baby. Is she mad? No, just needed some space. Ellie considered this with the seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster. Sometimes I need space too, like when you make me eat vegetables. Despite everything, Mason smiled. Yeah, kind of like that. She'll come back though, right? Yeah, Elle, she'll come back. He hoped he was right. Arya didn't come back until after Ellie was asleep. Mason heard the front door open around 10, the soft sound of her footsteps in the hallway. He was on the couch, pretending to watch TV, actually just staring at the screen. She appeared in the doorway, still in her coat, hair windblown. We need to talk, she said. Okay. She sat on the opposite end of the couch, safe distance. I've been thinking about what you said. And? And you're right. This has gotten complicated. She pulled off her coat, folded it with meticulous care. Buying time. But that doesn't mean we should blow up an arrangement that's working. So we just ignore it? We acknowledge it and move forward anyway. She finally looked at him. We have 7 months left on the contract. Let's get through them. Reevaluate when the time comes, but we can't. She stopped. We can't act on this. Not while we're under contract. It muddies everything. Arya, please. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm asking you to wait. Give me time to figure out what I'm doing, what I want, because right now I don't know, and I can't afford to make another impulsive decision. Mason wanted to argue, wanted to push, but the vulnerability in her eyes stopped him. Okay, he said. 7 months. Then we talk about this for real. Thank you. She stood, grabbed her coat, paused at the hallway entrance. For what it's worth, she said without turning around, this scares me too. The way I feel when I'm here with you and Ellie. It scares me because it feels like something I could lose. Then she was gone, disappearing into her room, leaving him alone with that confession. The next few weeks settled into something that looked normal from the outside but felt loaded underneath. Mason and Arya maintained their routine, dinners together, Ellie's bedtime, weekends at the park. But there was a new tension now. Awareness. Every accidental touch felt intentional. Every shared look lasted too long. They were careful, professional, both pretending they hadn't said the things they'd said. It was exhausting. Rebecca's first supervised visitation happened on a Saturday. Mason dropped Ellie off at the designated meeting spot, a family center with bright murals and toys that looked aggressively cheerful. A court-appointed supervisor named Lynn greeted them with a smile that was probably meant to be reassuring. You must be Ellie, Lynn said. Your mom's already here, excited to see you. Ellie clung to Mason's hand. Do I have to? His heart broke a little. Yeah, baby, but just for a few hours. Then I'll pick you up and we'll do something fun. Can Miss Arya come? Lynn glanced at Mason with interest. He could see the questions forming. Who was Miss Arya? Why was the child so attached to her? We'll see, Mason said. Be good, okay? Rebecca was in one of the visitation rooms, looking nervous in a way he'd rarely seen her. Marcus was nowhere in sight, smart, probably, given the circumstances. Ellie went to her slowly. Rebecca's face lit up. Hi, baby. I missed you so much. Hi, Mommy. The reunion was awkward, stilted. Mason watched through the window for a minute, then forced himself to leave. Lynn would supervise. Ellie would be fine. He drove home, the apartment, not his old place, which still felt weird to think about, and found Arya in the kitchen making coffee. How'd it go? She asked. About as well as expected. Ellie didn't want to go. She'll adjust. Arya poured him a cup without asking. They'd learned each other's habits. Black for him, cream and sugar for her. Rebecca is still her mother. Doesn't feel like it. Mason took the coffee. She walked out when Ellie was a baby. Now she wants to play mom because it looks good. Maybe. Or maybe she's realizing what she gave up. Arya leaned against the counter. People can change. Do you really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, I'm stuck being who my family thinks I am forever. There was something raw in her voice. Mason wanted to ask about it, but his phone buzzed. Connor Blake's name flashed on the screen. Your brother's calling me. Arya's expression went cold. Don't answer it. Why would he? Mason, don't. But curiosity won. He answered. Hello? Mason Carter. We haven't been properly introduced. Connor Blake. The voice was smooth, confident, exactly like he'd been at that dinner. Do you have a minute? What do you want? Just to talk, man to man, about my sister. Arya was shaking her head frantically, mouthing, hang up. Mason moved to the living room. I'm listening. Good. Here's the thing. I know my sister. Better than anyone, probably. And this whole whirlwind marriage situation, it's classic Arya. Impulsive, dramatic, designed to piss off our father. Get to the point. The point is, you're a pawn. She's using you to avoid dealing with her responsibilities. And when she's done, when this little rebellion runs its course, she'll move on. That's what she does. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Connor laughed. Let me guess. She's been great with your kid, helpful, supportive, making you think this could be real. Mason's grip tightened on the phone. Here's what you don't know, Connor continued. Arya has a pattern. She gets invested in causes, people, projects, goes all in, then loses interest and burns it all down. I've watched her do it her entire life. Right now, you're the cause, but eventually she'll get bored. And when that happens, where does that leave you and your daughter? We have a contract. Contracts end. Then what? She goes back to her life, you go back to yours, and your kid is the one who gets attached and then abandoned. Sound familiar? It did. It sounded exactly like what Rebecca had done. I'm not trying to be cruel, Connor said, voice softening into something almost sympathetic. I'm trying to give you a reality check. Arya's not built for this, for family, for commitment. She's too much like our father, except she hasn't figured that out yet. Is that it? That's it. Do with the information what you want. Connor paused. But if you care about your daughter at all, you'll protect her from the inevitable fallout. The line went dead. Mason stood there, phone in hand, Connor's words echoing. Arya appeared in the doorway. What did he say? That you're using me. That you'll get bored and bail. He met her eyes. That I'm an idiot for believing any of this is real. Her face went pale. Mason. Is he right? No, he's... She stopped, started again. He's trying to mess with your head. That's what Connor does. He finds the weak spot and pushes. So there's no truth to it? You don't have a pattern of getting invested and then bailing? Arya's silence was answer enough. I've made mistakes, she said finally. I've hurt people by not knowing what I wanted, by committing to things I couldn't follow through on. But this, she gestured around the apartment. This isn't that. How do I know? You don't. Her voice was raw. That's the terrifying part, Mason. Neither of us knows how this ends, but I'm here. I'm trying. That has to count for something. Does it? I don't know. The frustration burst out of her. I don't know what you want me to say, that I promise I won't hurt you, that this will definitely work out. I can't promise that. No one can. But Connor's right, isn't he? When the contract ends, you'll go back to your life. This was always temporary. It was supposed to be. Was? Arya pressed her hands to her face. I don't know anymore. A month ago, I had a plan, clear exit strategy, but now... She dropped her hands. Now I come home and Ellie shows me drawings from school. You make terrible coffee and I drink it anyway. We have inside jokes about that weird neighbor who tap dances at midnight. I don't want to leave. But you will, probably. Because that's what I do. That's what Connor was trying to tell you. She laughed, but it was bitter. I'm my father's daughter. I run when things get hard, when they get real. So prove him wrong. How? By staying, by meaning it when you say you're trying. Mason moved closer. You asked for 7 months, fine, but use them. Actually let yourself be part of this. Not the contract version, the real version. What if I can't? Then at least we'll know. And yeah, it'll hurt. But hiding behind the contract isn't working anymore. Arya looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, fear giving way to determination. Okay, she said. Okay. No more hiding. No more hiding. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Her hand found his. It was the first time they touched like this, deliberately, not by accident or necessity. I'm terrified, she admitted. Me too. Good. At least we're terrified together. Before either of them could overthink it, she kissed him. Brief, tentative. A question. He answered by pulling her closer, kissing her properly. She tasted like coffee and fear and possibility. When they broke apart, she was breathing hard. That was a terrible idea, she said. Probably. We're going to mess this up. Definitely. But we're doing it anyway? Yeah, we're doing it anyway. She smiled, real, not the professional mask she usually wore. 7 months. Let's see what happens. 7 months. They stood there in the living room, holding hands like teenagers, both knowing they'd just made everything infinitely more complicated. Neither of them cared. The shift was subtle at first, small changes that added up. Arya started working from the apartment more often. Mason found himself texting her throughout the day. Stupid stuff, nothing important, just staying connected. They stopped retreating to separate corners of the apartment in the evening, started sitting closer on the couch, let their hands brush, and didn't immediately pull away. Ellie noticed. "Are you and Miss Arya boyfriend and girlfriend now?" she asked one morning at breakfast, completely out of nowhere. Mason nearly choked on his coffee. "What makes you ask that?" "You hold hands sometimes, like the people on TV." Arya looked at Mason, eyebrow raised. His move. "We're married, Elle," Mason said carefully. "So kind of like boyfriend and girlfriend, but more." "Oh," Ellie processed this with a mouthful of cereal. "Okay, I like it. Miss Arya's nice." "She is, isn't she?" "Definitely nicer than Mommy's boyfriend Marcus. He talks weird." Arya covered her laugh with a cough. That afternoon, while Ellie was at preschool, Connor showed up at the apartment. Mason opened the door to find Arya's brother standing there in an expensive suit, looking like he owned the building. "We need to talk," Connor said. "Arya's not here." "I know. I came to talk to you." He didn't wait for an invitation, just walked past Mason into the apartment, looked around with barely concealed disdain. "Nice place. My sister has good taste in real estate, if nothing else." "What do you want, Connor?" "To warn you, again, since you apparently didn't listen the first time." Connor turned, hands in his pockets. "This thing with Arya, it's about to blow up in your face." "How's that?" "Our father's been digging. He knows about your custody case, your financial history, every detail of your life before you conveniently married my sister." Connor smiled without warmth. "He's building a case to have the marriage annulled. Fraud, misrepresentation. He's got lawyers who specialize in this kind of thing." Mason's stomach dropped. "He can't do that. He can try. And if he succeeds, where does that leave you? Your custody arrangement was based partly on your improved circumstances. Circumstances that came from this marriage. If the marriage is invalidated, Rebecca could petition for a new hearing." "Exactly." Connor's expression almost looked sympathetic. Almost. "I'm not trying to destroy you, Mason. I'm trying to make you see reality. My father will not accept this marriage. He'll tear it apart, and you and your daughter will be collateral damage." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because despite what you think, I don't actually want to see a kid get hurt." Connor moved toward the door. "End this now, on your terms. Walk away with the money you've made, protect your custody arrangement, and get out before my father destroys everything." "And if I don't?" Connor paused at the door. "Then you'll learn what it means to go up against Richard Blake. And trust me, you don't want that." He left, closing the door with a soft click that felt ominous. Mason stood in the quiet apartment, mind racing. He pulled out his phone, called David. "I need to know something. If my marriage to Arya gets annulled, what happens to the custody arrangement?" David was quiet for a moment. "It's complicated. The ruling was based on multiple factors, but your improved living situation was significant. If that situation is suddenly invalidated due to fraud—" "It wasn't fraud. We're legally married." "Legally, yes. But if Richard Blake can prove it was a marriage of convenience entered into specifically to influence the custody decision, a judge might view that as misrepresentation. Rebecca's lawyers could argue you manipulated the system. So she could get Ellie. She could petition for a new hearing. Whether she'd win is another question, but it would definitely reopen everything." David sighed. "Mason, what's going on?" "Richard Blake is planning to have the marriage annulled. Can he prove fraud?" Mason thought about the contract in his drawer, about the email chain, about everything that could be used as evidence that this started as a business arrangement. "Maybe," he admitted. "Then you need to make a choice. End the marriage now before Blake moves forward, or commit to it fully and prepare for a legal battle." "How do I commit fully to something that started as a lie?" "By making it true." David's voice softened. "Mason, I've seen how you and Arya are together, how she is with Ellie. If there's something real there, fight for it. But if it's still just an arrangement, get out now before it costs you everything." After they hung up, Mason sat on the couch, head in his hands. The front door opened. Arya, home early. "Mason, what's wrong?" He told her everything. Connor's visit, Richard's plans, the threat to the custody arrangement. Arya went very still. "He's bluffing." "Is he?" "My father likes to intimidate people, make them think he's all-powerful. But annulling a legal marriage isn't that easy. He'd need proof of fraud." "Arya, we have a contract, an email chain, documentation of the entire arrangement. That's not exactly hard to prove." She sat down beside him. So we destroy it. The contract, the emails, everything. That doesn't change what it was. No, but it changes what it is. She took his hand. We're not faking this anymore, Mason. We haven't been for weeks. My father can dig all he wants. He'll find a marriage certificate and two people who care about each other. The rest is just how we got here. And if he pushes anyway, if he finds a way to invalidate everything, then we fight him. Together. Her grip tightened. I'm not letting my father destroy this, not this time. This isn't just about us, Arya. If we lose, Ellie loses too. We won't lose. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'm not running. She turned his face toward hers. Connor thinks I'll bail when things get hard. My father thinks he can intimidate me into submission. They're both wrong. Are they? I'm here, aren't I? I'm choosing this. Choosing you and Ellie. That has to mean something. Mason wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that this time would be different. But Connor's warning echoed. She gets invested and then bails. That's what she does. I need to think, he said. Arya's face fell, but she nodded. Okay. Take all the time you need. She stood, started toward her room. Arya? She stopped. I want this to be real, Mason said. I need you to know that, but I also need to protect Ellie. And right now, I don't know if those two things are compatible. I understand. But the hurt in her eyes said otherwise. That night, Mason lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. Down the hall, Ellie was asleep, completely unaware that the stability they'd built might be about to crumble. Across the hall, Arya was probably also awake, dealing with her own version of this crisis. His phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. I heard about Richard Blake's plans. If you want to avoid another custody fight, we should talk. Of course she'd heard. Rebecca always had her ear to the ground when it came to things that might benefit her. He didn't respond. Another text came through. This one from Arya. I know you're awake. I can hear you thinking through the wall. Despite everything, he smiled. Can't sleep. Me neither. This is a mess. Yeah. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. I'm not running. I want to believe that. Then believe it. I've given you plenty of reasons not to trust me, but I'm asking you to anyway. Mason stared at the message for a long time. Finally, he typed, Okay, I trust you. The response was immediate. Thank you. Then, come here. What? To my room. I don't want to have this conversation through a wall. He got up, moved down the hall, knocked softly on her door. She opened it, wearing pajamas that looked nothing like the polished, professional version of her he'd first met. Her hair was messy. No makeup. Just Arya. Hi, she said. Hi. She pulled him inside, closed the door. They sat on her bed, backs against the headboard, shoulders touching. I'm scared, she admitted. Of your father? Of everything. Of failing you, of failing Ellie, of proving Connor right. She turned to look at him. But I'm more scared of not trying. Me too. So we're doing this? Really doing this? Yeah, we're doing this. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, neither speaking, both thinking about the fight ahead. Finally, Arya said, We should destroy the contract tonight. Get rid of any evidence that this was ever anything but real. Is that enough? I don't know, but it's a start. Mason retrieved the contract from his room. They sat on Arya's floor with it spread between them, pages and pages of legalese that had once felt like a lifeline and now felt like a time bomb. You sure about this? Mason asked. Arya picked up the document, held it for a moment. Then she tore it in half. I'm sure. They ripped it to pieces together, methodical and thorough. When they were done, Arya gathered the scraps and carried them to the kitchen, fed them into the trash compactor. There, she said. Now it's just us. No contract, no exit strategy. Just us, Mason echoed. She kissed him then, fierce and determined. A promise. When they broke apart, she said, Whatever happens with my father, we face it together. Together. They went back to her room, lay down side by side in the dark, holding hands like a lifeline. Tomorrow, they'd figure out how to fight Richard Blake, how to protect what they'd built. Tonight, They just held on to each other and tried to believe that would be enough. Morning came too early. Mason woke up still in Arya's bed, her arm draped across his chest, light filtering through curtains they'd forgotten to close. For a moment, just one perfect, fragile moment, everything felt normal, like they were actually the married couple they were pretending to be. Then his phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. Mason extracted himself carefully, trying not to wake Arya, but her eyes opened anyway. "What time is it?" she mumbled. "Early. It's David." He answered. "Yeah? We have a problem. Richard Blake filed a motion this morning. He's petitioning to have your marriage investigated for fraud." Mason's stomach turned to ice. "Already?" "He moves fast when he wants something. There's a hearing scheduled for next Friday. The judge will review evidence and determine whether there's grounds for annulment proceedings." "What kind of evidence?" "Anything that suggests the marriage was entered into for purposes other than a genuine marital relationship. Financial transactions, timing of the marriage relative to your custody case, witness testimony about the nature of your relationship." David paused. "Mason, do you have anything, emails, contracts, anything that could be used against you?" Mason looked at Arya. She was sitting up now, listening. "We destroyed it," he said. "Last night, everything." "Good. That's good. But they'll still dig. They'll interview people, look at bank records, build a timeline." David's voice was grim. "This is going to get ugly. And if Rebecca's lawyers catch wind of it, they already have. She texted me last night." "Of course she did. She'll use this, Mason. If the marriage gets invalidated, she'll petition to reopen the custody case immediately." Arya grabbed his hand, squeezed hard. "So what do we do?" Mason asked. "We prove the marriage is real, document everything, photos, witnesses who can testify to your genuine relationship, evidence of cohabitation and shared life. We need to show that whatever this started as, it's legitimate now." After the call ended, Mason sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "Hey." Arya moved behind him, wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "We knew this was coming. Knowing it and living it are different things. We'll handle it. We've got a week to prepare. A week to prove that our marriage isn't a sham, even though it started as exactly that." He turned to face her. "How do we do that, Arya? How do we convince a judge that this is real when we can barely convince ourselves?" She flinched. "I'm convinced. Are you? Or are you just committed to not letting your father win?" "Both. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." She stood, pacing. "Look, I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm doing here. I've never been good at relationships, never wanted to be tied down. But this," she gestured between them, "this feels different. It feels like something I want to fight for. Because it's real, or because your father's trying to destroy it? Does it matter?" "Yeah, Arya, it really does." She stopped pacing, met his eyes. "Then let me be clear. I care about you. I care about Ellie. This stopped being about my father or avoiding an arranged marriage weeks ago. Maybe I should have said that sooner, but I'm saying it now. You care about us. Yes. But do you love us?" The question hung in the air between them. Arya's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, fear, something that might have been panic. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't know what love is supposed to feel like. My parents' marriage was a business merger. Every relationship I've seen has been about strategy and appearance. So I don't know if what I feel is love or just connection, need, wanting to protect something good." It wasn't the answer Mason wanted, but it was honest. "Okay," he said. "Then we work with what we have." Which is? Two people who care about each other trying to protect a kid from getting hurt. Maybe that's enough. Arya looked like she wanted to argue, but Ellie's voice called from down the hall. "Daddy, Miss Arya, I'm hungry." Reality crashed back in. They had a 4-year-old to feed, a legal battle to prepare for, and a week to turn their complicated arrangement into something that looked unquestionably real. Over breakfast, pancakes that Arya made while Mason helped Ellie set the table, they tried to act normal. But Ellie wasn't fooled. "You guys are weird today," she announced, syrup dripping down her chin. "Weird how?" Mason asked. "I don't know. Worried weird." She looked between them with those two perceptive eyes. "Did I do something bad?" "No, baby. You're perfect." Mason wiped her chin. Grown-ups just have grown-up stuff to deal with sometimes. Is it about mommy? Sort of. But you don't need to worry about it. Ellie considered this, then shrugged, and went back to drowning her pancakes in syrup. Crisis averted, at least for her. After dropping Ellie at preschool, Mason and Arya met with David at his office. Margaret Chen was there too, looking as severe as ever. Let's be realistic about what we're facing, Margaret said without preamble. Richard Blake has resources and connections. He'll have private investigators combing through your lives. They'll interview neighbors, coworkers, anyone who might have insight into the nature of your relationship. So we need those people to say the right things, Arya said. We need them to tell the truth, which means your relationship needs to actually look legitimate. Margaret pulled out a legal pad. Walk me through a typical day. How do you interact? What do you do together? What would neighbors see? Mason and Arya looked at each other. We have dinner together, Mason started. All three of us. Arya helps Ellie with homework sometimes. We go to the park on weekends, Arya added. Mason cooks. I usually clean up. We watch TV in the evenings. Do you share a bedroom? The question landed like a bomb. No, Mason said. We have separate rooms. Margaret's expression didn't change, but Mason could see the problem written all over her face. That's going to be an issue, David said quietly. Married couples typically share a bedroom. Separate rooms suggests a business arrangement. We're taking things slow, Arya said. That's not unusual. For dating couples, no. For married couples, yes. Margaret set down her pen. I'm not saying you need to actually share a room, but appearances matter. If investigators talk to your doorman, your neighbors, anyone with access to the building, what will they say? That you live like roommates or like a married couple? Mason felt his jaw tighten. So we need to what? Stage our lives? You need to live like you're married, genuinely married, because that's what you're claiming to be. Margaret's voice was firm. I understand this is uncomfortable, but if you want to win this, you need to commit fully. After the meeting, Mason and Arya sat in his car in the parking garage, neither moving to start the engine. We could just end this, Mason said. Right now, before it gets worse. Tell your father he wins. I find another way to protect my custody arrangement. Is that what you want? I want Ellie to be safe. Everything else is secondary. Arya was quiet for a long moment. What if I moved into your room? Mason turned to look at her. What? Not for... we don't have to... She was flustered, which was unusual for her. We could share a room without sharing a bed. Get a second bed, or I could take the couch in there. But it would look right. To anyone checking. Arya... I'm trying here, Mason. I know I'm not good at this, at any of this. But I'm trying to make it work. He studied her face, looking for doubt or reservation. Found only determination. Okay, he said. We share a room. Okay. But we're doing this for real, not just for show. If we're going to convince everyone else this marriage is legitimate, we need to convince ourselves first. Agreed. They drove home in silence, both processing what they'd just committed to. Richard Blake's first move came 2 days later. Mason was at work when his supervisor pulled him aside. There's a woman here asking questions about you, says she's doing a background check for legal purposes. Mason's blood ran cold. What kind of questions? How long you've worked here, your attendance record, whether you've ever mentioned your wife. The supervisor, Jim, a decent guy who'd always been fair, looked concerned. Mason, is everything okay? Yeah, just legal stuff related to my divorce. The woman made it sound more serious than that. It's complicated. Jim nodded slowly. Look, I told her you're a good worker, reliable, but she seemed more interested in your personal life than your work performance. Just thought you should know. Mason found the investigator in the parking lot, climbing into a sleek sedan. She was middle-aged, professional-looking, with a tablet and an air of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Can I help you? Mason called. She turned, assessed him. Mason Carter? That's me. Diane Porter. I'm conducting an investigation on behalf of Richard Blake regarding the legitimacy of your marriage to Arya Blake. She pulled out a business card, handed it over. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I don't have to talk to you. No, you don't. But cooperation looks better than obstruction. She smiled, but it was all business. How long have you and Arya been romantically involved? I'm not discussing my marriage with a stranger in a parking lot. Fair enough. I'll get the information elsewhere. She opened her car door. I've already spoken with several of your neighbors, your doorman, Ellie's preschool teachers. Everyone seems to agree that Ms. Blake is very involved in Ellie's life. She is. She's her stepmother. Interesting choice of words. Not my wife, but her stepmother. Diane made a note on her tablet. The preschool mentioned that Ellie calls her Miss Arya, not Mom or even Arya. Just Miss Arya, like a teacher or babysitter. Mason's hands clenched. She's 4. She calls people what's comfortable for her. Of course, just making observations. Diane climbed into her car. I'll be in touch if I have more questions. She drove off, leaving Mason standing in the parking lot feeling violated. That night, he and Arya went through their apartment with new eyes, looking for anything that might seem off to an investigator. The separate bedrooms were the obvious issue, but there were smaller things too. Arya's toiletries were all in her bathroom, none in Mason's. The photos on the walls were of Ellie, not of them as a couple. The living room looked like a shared space, but the bedrooms were clearly individual. We need photos, Arya said, of us together, looking like a couple. We don't have any, so we take some. Now, make them look natural. They spent an awkward hour staging photos, sitting on the couch together, at the dining table, in the park with Ellie. It felt forced and wrong, but they did it anyway. Printed some out, framed them, scattered them around the apartment. That night, after Ellie was asleep, they stood in Mason's room, their room now, and looked at the problem. We can't both sleep in that bed, Mason said, looking at his queen-size mattress. I'll take the floor. No way. I'll take the floor. Mason, you work a physical job. You need actual rest. I can handle a sleeping bag for a week. They compromised by pulling out the couch in Mason's room, a small love seat that was barely long enough for Arya to lie on. She insisted it was fine. He knew it wasn't, but they were out of options. Moving her things from her room felt surreal. Clothes in the shared closet, toiletries in the bathroom, making it look like they'd always shared this space. This is weird, Arya said, hanging up a dress next to Mason's work shirts. Yeah, but kind of nice too. She glanced at him. Is that weird to say? Probably, but I get it. That night, they lay in the dark. Mason in the bed, Arya on the uncomfortable love seat, and listened to each other breathe. You still awake? Arya whispered. Yeah. I'm sorry you're going through this. The investigation, the scrutiny, all of it. It's not your fault. It's exactly my fault. I'm the one who proposed this arrangement, who dragged you into my family drama. I agreed to it. That makes it on both of us. Silence stretched out. Then Arya's voice came again, smaller this time. Do you regret it? Meeting me? Mason thought about the past 2 months. The stress, the lies, the constant fear of everything falling apart. Then he thought about coming home to a clean apartment and food on the table. About Ellie having her own room. About the custody case he'd won. About Arya's hand in his and the way she looked at his daughter like she actually mattered. No, he said. I don't regret it. Even if we lose? We're not going to lose. But if we do, then we tried. That's more than I had before you showed up. He heard her shift on the love seat, adjusting to find comfort that probably didn't exist. Come here, he said. What? The bed's big enough for both of us. You're not sleeping on that thing all night. Mason, we're supposed to be married. Married people share a bed. We might as well get used to it. After a long pause, Arya stood, moved to the bed, lay down on the far edge, as far from him as possible while still technically sharing the mattress. This okay? She asked. Yeah, this is fine. They lay there, backs to each other, both hyper-aware of the other's presence. Good night, Mason. Night, Arya. Mason closed his eyes and tried to pretend this was normal. That sharing a bed with a woman he'd married for convenience but was starting to actually care about was just another Thursday night. He must have slept eventually, because he woke up to find Arya curled against him, her head on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. Morning light streamed through the window. She was still asleep, breathing slow and steady. He should have moved, put distance between them before she woke up and felt awkward. But he didn't. He just lay there, holding her, and let himself pretend for a few more minutes that this was real. The hearing was scheduled for Friday afternoon. By Wednesday, the investigation had touched every corner of their lives. Diane Porter had interviewed their doorman, Richard, who apparently gave a glowing report about how sweet they were together, always holding hands, clearly devoted. Mason had never held Arya's hand in front of Richard, which meant Richard was either lying to help them or genuinely fooled by whatever vibe they gave off. She'd talked to Ellie's preschool teachers, who'd mentioned how involved Arya was in pickup and drop-off, how she knew all the other kids' names, how Ellie lit up when she arrived. All good signs. She'd interviewed Mason's co-workers, most of whom knew nothing about his personal life beyond the basics. Jim had apparently gone to bat for him, though, describing Mason as a dedicated father and devoted husband. The problem was Rebecca. Diane had interviewed her too. And Rebecca, according to David, had been carefully diplomatic. She'd confirmed the timeline, that Mason's marriage had happened right before the custody hearing. She'd mentioned that she'd never heard of Arya before the marriage. She'd noted that Mason had been financially desperate. None of it was technically damning, but all of it painted a picture of a man who'd married for convenience. "She's setting you up," Arya said when David relayed the information. They were in his office again, going over strategy, pretending to be neutral while making you look calculated. "She's telling the truth," Mason said. "That's the problem. Everything she said is accurate." "But the context is missing," David interjected. "Yes, you married quickly. Yes, you were struggling financially, but couples marry quickly all the time, and needing financial stability doesn't negate genuine feelings." "So what's our strategy?" Arya asked. "Simple honesty," Margaret said. "You admit the relationship moved fast, that practical concerns were part of the equation, but you emphasize the genuine connection, the fact that you're building a life together, that this isn't just a piece of paper." "Will that be enough?" Mason asked. "It'll have to be." Thursday night, the night before the hearing, Mason couldn't sleep. He gave up around midnight, went to the kitchen for water, found Arya already there with a glass of wine. "You too?" she said. "Yeah." She poured him a glass. They sat at the dining table, the apartment quiet around them. "I keep thinking about what happens if we lose," Mason said. "We won't. But if we do, if your father gets the marriage annulled, Rebecca petitions for custody again, all of this falls apart." He took a drink. "What happens to us?" Arya was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know." "Would you stay? If there was no legal reason to anymore?" "Would you want me to?" "I asked first." She smiled slightly. "Fair." She turned the wine glass in her hands, watching the liquid catch the light. 6 months ago, if someone told me I'd be living with a single father and his daughter, arguing with my family, fighting a legal battle to stay married to someone I barely knew, I would have laughed or run. And now? Now I can't imagine not being here. She looked at him. "I love coming home to Ellie's chatter about her day. I love the way she shows me every single drawing like it's a masterpiece. I love how seriously you take being her father, even when you're exhausted. I love—" She stopped, corrected. "I care about this life we've built, even if it started as a lie." "That's not the same as loving it." "No, but it's what I have right now." Her eyes were bright. "I'm not good with feelings, Mason. I don't trust them. But I trust this, the routine, the small moments, the way it feels like home." "Home," Mason echoed. "Is that enough? For you?" He thought about it. Really thought about it. "I don't know. Ask me again after tomorrow." "Fair?" They sat in silence, drinking wine at midnight like two people on the edge of something they couldn't name. "If we lose," Arya said suddenly, "I'm not going back to my family. That part of my life is over." "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere new. Somewhere I can figure out who I am without my father's voice in my head." She met his eyes. "But I'd miss this. I'd miss you and Ellie." "You could still visit. It wouldn't be the same." "No, it wouldn't." More silence. Then Mason said, "For what it's worth, I think you're already figuring out who you are. And she's pretty great." Arya's expression softened. "Don't make me cry the night before I have to face my father in court." "Wouldn't dream of it." But her eyes were wet anyway. They went to bed eventually, lying in the dark in their shared room that still felt strange and right at the same time. "Mason, Arya's voice was quiet. Yeah? Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for letting me be part of this, even if it was supposed to be temporary. It's not over yet. I know, but just in case. Mason reached across the space between them, found her hand in the darkness, held it. We're going to win, he said. How do you know? Because we have to. Because Ellie needs us. Because I'm not ready to lose this yet. Lose what? The marriage? You. Arya's breath caught. She squeezed his hand tighter. They fell asleep like that, hands linked across the mattress, both trying to believe that wanting something badly enough could make it true. Friday morning arrived with brutal clarity. Mason woke up with Arya still holding his hand, sunlight streaming through the window, and a knot of dread in his stomach. Today was the day. Win or lose, real or fraud, everything they'd built either stood or collapsed. Ellie was oblivious over breakfast, chattering about a field trip to the zoo her class was planning. Arya engaged with her, asking questions, laughing at her daughter's enthusiasm, acting like nothing was wrong. Mason watched them and felt his chest tighten. This was what he was fighting for, not just the marriage, but this. These small moments of normalcy that felt like family. The neighbor who usually watched Ellie arrived at 9. Mason kissed his daughter goodbye, held her maybe a second too long. Daddy, you're squishing me, she complained. Sorry, baby. Love you. Love you too. Love you, Miss Arya. Love you, Ellie. Arya's voice was steady, but her hand shook slightly as she picked up her purse. In the car, neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. The courthouse was downtown, all concrete and glass and the weight of justice. They met David and Margaret in the lobby. Both lawyers looked calm, professional, ready. Remember, Margaret said, be honest. Don't embellish, don't hide. The truth is your best defense. Even if the truth is that we started this as a business arrangement? Arya asked. Especially then, because you're not hiding it. You're acknowledging it and showing how it evolved. Margaret's expression was stern. Marriages start for all kinds of reasons. What matters is what they become. The courtroom was smaller than Mason expected. Richard Blake was already there with his legal team, 3 attorneys in expensive suits who looked like they could tear apart a marriage with their bare hands. Connor sat beside his father, expression unreadable. Rebecca was there too, in the back row. She caught Mason's eye and gave a small, sad smile that felt like sympathy or pity or maybe victory. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Richard's lead attorney was a woman named Judith Carr, sharp-eyed and precise. She laid out the case methodically. The timeline of the marriage relative to Mason's custody case, the financial benefits Mason received, the speed of the relationship, the lack of a traditional courtship period. This is a textbook marriage of convenience, Judith said. Mr. Carter needed financial stability and legal support for his custody battle. Miss Blake needed to avoid an arrangement her family had planned. They entered into a contract, which they've since destroyed, to benefit each other. This is fraud, Your Honor. A manipulation of the legal system for personal gain. Margaret stood. Your Honor, what my colleague describes as fraud, we call practicality. Yes, Mr. Carter and Miss Blake's relationship developed quickly. Yes, both parties had individual challenges that marriage helped address. But that doesn't make the marriage illegitimate. People marry for all kinds of reasons. Financial security, family pressure, convenience. What matters is whether there's a genuine marital relationship now, and the evidence will show that there is. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Morrison, looked between them. I'll hear testimony. Mr. Blake, you may call your first witness. Diane Porter took the stand. She walked through her investigation, presenting everything she'd found. The separate bedrooms that had recently become one shared room, the lack of photos until very recently, the preschool teacher's observation that Ellie called Arya Miss Arya, rather than anything more familial. And what conclusion did you draw from your investigation? Judith asked. That Mr. Carter and Miss Blake are living together and cooperating to appear married, but the relationship lacks the genuine intimacy and history one would expect from a legitimate marriage. Margaret cross-examined. Ms. Porter, did anyone you interviewed suggest that Mr. Carter and Ms. Blake seemed unhappy together? No. Did anyone suggest they were merely tolerating each other? No. In fact, several people, the doorman, the preschool teachers, described them as affectionate and genuinely connected, didn't they? Some did use those words, yes. So your conclusion is based on what? Bedroom arrangements and photo timelines, neither of which are legal requirements for a valid marriage? It's based on the totality of circumstances suggesting a recent and convenient arrangement rather than a genuine relationship. Margaret sat down, having made her point. The next witness was Rebecca. She took the stand looking composed and sympathetic. Judith kept it simple. Miss Harding, how long were you married to Mason Carter? 4 years. We divorced when our daughter was 18 months old. And in your experience, how would you describe Mr. Carter's approach to relationships? Margaret objected. Relevance? Goes to pattern and character, Your Honor, Judith said. I'll allow it. Witness may answer. Rebecca's eyes flicked to Mason. Mason is very practical, logical. He makes decisions based on what's best for Ellie, which I respect. But he's not typically impulsive or romantic. Yet he married Ms. Blake after knowing her for only a matter of weeks. Does that strike you as consistent with his character? No, it doesn't. What's your theory on why he would act so out of character? Margaret started to object again, but Rebecca answered first. I think he was desperate. I think he saw an opportunity to solve his problems and took it. That's not a criticism. I understand why he did it, but it doesn't make the marriage real. The words landed like punches. Mason felt Arya tense beside him. Margaret's cross-examination was gentle but pointed. Ms. Harding, you're currently seeking to modify the custody arrangement, correct? I've considered it, yes. So you have a vested interest in discrediting Mr. Carter's current living situation. I have an interest in what's best for my daughter, which you believe is living with you rather than her father. I believe she deserves the most stable environment possible. And yet the mediator disagreed with you, ruled that Mr. Carter provides exactly that stability. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Circumstances can change. Indeed they can. Margaret returned to her seat. Finally, Judith called Richard Blake himself. He took the stand with the confidence of someone used to being listened to. His testimony was measured, almost sad. My daughter has always been headstrong, he said, independent to a fault. When we tried to guide her toward a beneficial arrangement with a family friend, purely optional, I might add, she rebelled. This marriage is that rebellion. Do you believe your daughter loves Mason Carter? Judith asked. Richard paused, as if considering it seriously. I believe she wants to love the idea of choosing her own path. Whether she actually loves Mr. Carter specifically, I couldn't say. What I do know is that Arya makes impulsive decisions when she feels cornered. This marriage has all the hallmarks of one of those decisions. Margaret stood for cross-examination. Mr. Blake, you attempted to arrange a marriage for your adult daughter against her wishes, correct? I suggested a mutually beneficial partnership. Did Arya want this partnership? She was resistant. So resistant that she married someone else rather than accept it. Doesn't that suggest genuine desire to not be with the person you'd chosen? It suggests rebellion. Or autonomy, the right to choose her own spouse. Margaret's voice sharpened. You don't believe your daughter is capable of making her own decisions about her life? I believe she's young and idealistic and doesn't always see the bigger picture. The bigger picture being what you want for her. What's best for her. According to you, Richard's expression finally cracked, showing irritation. According to decades of experience and knowledge of how the world works. But not according to Arya herself. Objection, Judith said. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Move on, Ms. Chen. Margaret smiled slightly. She'd made her point. When Richard stepped down, Judge Morrison called for a recess. Mason and Arya huddled with their lawyers in a conference room. It could go either way, David said. Rebecca's testimony was damaging, but we expected that. Richard came across as controlling, which helps us. But the timing and circumstances are still suspicious. So what now? Mason asked. Now you testify, Margaret said. Both of you. And you tell the truth. The afternoon session began with Mason on the stand. Judith Carr approached like a shark circling prey. Mr. Carter, when did you first meet Arya Blake? About 2.5 months ago. And when did you marry her? About 2 months ago. So you knew her for approximately 2 weeks before marrying her? Yes. Had you dated anyone seriously since your divorce from Rebecca Harding? No. So your first serious relationship in years was with a woman you knew for 2 weeks and then married. That's quite a whirlwind romance. Mason kept his voice steady. It happened fast. I won't deny that. Why the rush? Here it was, the moment of truth. I needed help, Mason said. I was facing a custody battle I couldn't afford to lose. I was behind on bills, living in a terrible apartment, barely keeping my head above water. Arya offered me a solution. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Judith smiled. So you married her for money and legal support? I married her because she was offering me a chance to keep my daughter. Was money part of it? Yes. Was I desperate? Absolutely. But that's not the whole story. What's the rest of the story? The rest is that somewhere between the practical arrangement and now, it became real. I care about her. She cares about me and Ellie. We're building something that started as convenience but turned into a family. How convenient that you discovered these genuine feelings right as this investigation began. We discovered them before that. We just didn't admit them out loud. Judith pulled out a document. I have here your email correspondence with Ms. Blake from before the marriage. In one email you write, "This is strictly business, right? No expectations beyond the contract." Does that sound like someone falling in love? Mason felt heat rise in his face. That was early on, before I knew her. Before you needed to convince a judge that your marriage is real, you mean? Objection, Margaret said. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, but the damage was done. Margaret's redirect was brief. Mr. Carter, do you love your wife? Mason looked at Arya, sitting in the front row. She looked terrified and hopeful and strong all at once. Yes, he said. I do. When did you realize that? I don't know exactly. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small ones. The way she is with Ellie, the way she makes terrible coffee but drinks mine anyway, the way she fights for what she believes in, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He kept his eyes on Arya. I didn't plan to fall in love with her, but I did anyway. No further questions. Then it was Arya's turn. She took the stand with visible nerves, which was almost comforting. The polished, controlled Arya who'd first proposed this arrangement would have been too perfect. This version, scared but determined, was real. Judith started strong. Ms. Blake, you proposed this arrangement to Mr. Carter, correct? Yes. In writing, via email? Yes. And you outlined specific terms? Financial support in exchange for marriage? Yes. That's prostitution with extra steps, isn't it? Objection! Margaret was on her feet. Inflammatory and inappropriate. Sustained. Miss Carr, watch yourself. Judith didn't look chastened. Let me rephrase. You paid Mr. Carter to marry you. I offered financial support as part of a mutually beneficial arrangement. To avoid dealing with your family. To maintain my autonomy, yes. By lying to everyone about the nature of your relationship. Arya's hands clenched in her lap. We weren't lying. We were married, legally married. The reasons for getting married were our business. Until those reasons constitute fraud, it's only fraud if it's still fake, and it's not. When did it stop being fake, Ms. Blake? Give me a date. Arya opened her mouth, closed it. I don't know the exact date. How convenient. It wasn't one day. It was gradual. Like Mason said, 1,000 small moments. Ellie asking me to read her bedtime stories. Mason making sure I ate when I was working late. Building a life together without realizing we were doing it. Or realizing you needed a better story for court. Arya's eyes flashed. I don't need a better story. I need my father to stop trying to control my life. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not whether my marriage is real, but whether he gets to dictate my future. Your Honor, Judith started, but Arya kept going. My father has spent my entire life telling me what to do, who to be, who to marry. And for once, I made my own choice. Maybe it started as rebellion. Maybe it was imperfect. But it's mine, and it's real. And no amount of lawyers or investigations will change that. The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison looked at Arya with something that might have been respect. Ms. Blake, she said, I appreciate your passion, but I need facts, not feelings. Do you love Mason Carter? Arya's eyes found Mason in the crowd. She looked terrified. I... She stopped. Started again. I don't know if I know how to love people the right way. My family didn't teach me that, but I know I don't want to lose him. I know Ellie feels like my daughter even though she's not. I know coming home to them is the best part of my day. If that's love, then yes. I love them. Margaret had no redirect. Neither did Judith. There was nothing left to say. Judge Morrison called another recess to review the evidence and testimony. Mason and Arya sat in the hallway, not speaking, both emotionally wrung out. Did I mess it up? Arya asked quietly. At the end? No, you were perfect. I don't feel perfect. I feel like I just laid myself open in front of my father and a room full of strangers. You did, and it was brave. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I meant it, what I said in there. I know. Do you really love me, or were you just saying what needed to be said? Mason turned her face toward his. Really love you. I should have said it sooner, before a courtroom, but I do. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm still figuring out what that means for me. Loving someone, being loved. I'm going to mess it up sometimes. So will I. We'll figure it out together. Promise? Promise. They sat like that until the bailiff called them back in. Judge Morrison took the bench, expression unreadable. I've reviewed the testimony and evidence, she said. This is an unusual case. The timeline is suspicious. The circumstances surrounding the marriage raise legitimate questions. However, she paused. Marriage is a legal contract, yes, but it's also a choice two people make to build a life together. And the evidence suggests that whatever this marriage began as, it has evolved into something genuine. Mason felt Arya's hand grip his tighter. The witnesses uniformly described a couple who appeared genuinely connected. The testimony from both parties, while acknowledging an unconventional beginning, demonstrated real emotion and commitment. Most importantly, there is a child involved whose welfare must be considered. Ellie Carter has formed an attachment to Miss Blake. Disrupting that attachment by annulling the marriage would not serve her best interests. Richard Blake's face was stone. Therefore, Judge Morrison continued, I find insufficient evidence of fraud. The marriage stands. Petition for annulment is denied. The courtroom erupted. Richard stood, furious, his lawyers trying to calm him. Connor looked shocked. Rebecca sat frozen in the back row. Mason turned to Arya. She was crying, smiling, laughing all at once. We won, she said. We won. They kissed right there in the courtroom, in front of everyone, and for the first time it wasn't for show. It was real. Outside the courthouse, David and Margaret were already fielding questions from Richard Blake's legal team about appeals and next steps. Mason barely heard any of it. His arm was around Arya's waist, her head against his shoulder, both of them still processing what had just happened. Mr. Carter. Mason turned. Richard Blake stood 10 feet away, Connor beside him. The lawyers had dispersed, leaving just the family. We need to talk, Richard said. I don't think we do. 5 minutes. Please. The word seemed to physically pain him. Arya stiffened. Dad, we won. It's over. It's not over. Not by a long shot. Richard's eyes were cold. But I'm willing to offer a truce. A truce? Arya repeated. How generous. Arya. Richard's voice softened slightly. Can we at least have a conversation? Somewhere private? Mason looked at Arya. She was tense, ready to bolt or fight. He squeezed her hand. 5 minutes, Mason said. That's it. They found a conference room on the second floor. Richard sat on one side of the table, Connor beside him looking uncomfortable. Mason and Arya sat across from them, a battlefield drawn in polished wood. You won today, Richard started. Legally. But that doesn't change the fundamental problem. Which is? Arya's voice was ice. That you've married someone completely unsuitable for our family's position. Someone with no connections, no resources of his own, no understanding of the world you come from. Richard's eyes flicked to Mason. No offense intended. Plenty taken, Mason said flatly. I'm being realistic. You work in a warehouse, Mr. Carter. You have a high school education and a child from a failed marriage. By any objective measure, you're not an appropriate match for my daughter. Arya slammed her hand on the table. That's enough. I'm not finished. Yes, you are. Arya stood. We're done here. We're done with this conversation, done with your approval, done with everything. Come on, Mason. Wait, Connor spoke for the first time. Just hear him out, please. Arya looked at her brother. Why? So he can insult Mason some more? So he can try to buy us off or threaten us into walking away? Because he's trying, Connor said quietly. In his incredibly terrible way, he's trying to reach out instead of just fighting. Richard shot Connor a look that could have melted steel, but Connor met it evenly. Arya sat back down slowly. Fine. Talk. Richard took a breath, clearly choosing his words carefully. I don't approve of this marriage. I probably never will. But the judge was right about one thing. There's a child involved. And regardless of my feelings about Mr. Carter, I don't want to be the reason that child loses stability. So you're backing off? Mason asked. I'm proposing a compromise. You stay married. I stop fighting it. In exchange, Arya resumes her position in the family business. Absolutely not, Arya said immediately. Hear me out. You come back on your terms. You choose your projects. You maintain your independence, but you're part of the company again, part of the family. With Mason completely shut out. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Arya's laugh was bitter. You want me back in the fold where you can control me while barely tolerating my husband. That's not a compromise, Dad. That's surrender with conditions. Richard's jaw tightened. What do you want me to say, Arya? That I'm thrilled about this situation? I'm not. But I'm trying to find a way forward that doesn't destroy this family completely. You're the one destroying it. You've been destroying it my whole life with your controlling, manipulative... Arya. Mason's voice was quiet but firm. She stopped, looked at him. Can we have a minute? Just us? Arya blinked, then nodded. They stepped out into the hallway, leaving Richard and Connor in the conference room. What are you doing? Arya asked. Thinking clearly, which neither of you are doing right now. Mason leaned against the wall. Look, your father's an ass. We're agreed on that, but he's also trying to build a bridge, even if he's doing it badly. A bridge he can pull out from under us whenever he wants. Maybe. Or maybe this is the best we're going to get. Mason took her hands. You love working in that business. You've told me about the projects you had, the things you wanted to build. Walking away from it completely because you hate your father seems like cutting off your nose to spite your face. I don't want to go back to being his puppet. So don't be. Go back on your terms, like he said, set boundaries. But don't throw away something you love out of pure stubbornness. Arya searched his face. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side. That's why I'm telling you the truth instead of what you want to hear. He touched her cheek. We won, Arya. The marriage is legal. Your father can't undo it. You have leverage now. Use it. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I hate that you're right. I'm rarely right. Enjoy it while it lasts. She smiled despite herself, then straightened. Okay, let's go negotiate. Back in the conference room, Richard looked wary. Connor looked hopeful. Here's the deal, Arya said. I come back to the company. I choose my own projects and my team. I report to you on business matters only. My personal life is off limits, and Mason is included in all family events. No more separate dinners, no more excluding him from conversations. He's my husband. You treat him accordingly. Richard was quiet for a long moment. I can agree to most of that. All of it or nothing. I will never be comfortable with this marriage, Arya. Asking me to pretend otherwise, I'm not asking you to be comfortable. I'm asking you to be civil, to respect my choice even if you don't agree with it. Arya's voice was steady. That's the compromise. Take it or leave it. Father and daughter stared at each other across the table. Connor looked between them, holding his breath. Finally, Richard nodded once. Fine, but I have one condition of my own. What? You sign a post-nuptial agreement protecting the family assets in the event of divorce. The words hung in the air. Mason felt Arya tense beside him. You want me to sign a document assuming my marriage will fail, Arya said slowly. I want to protect what our family has built. That's prudent, not pessimistic. Richard's eyes flicked to Mason. If this marriage is as real as you claim, then it should last regardless of financial arrangements. Mason spoke before Arya could. I'll sign it. Mason, Arya started. I'll sign it, he repeated. I didn't marry you for money. I don't need access to your family's fortune. If putting that in writing makes your father feel better, fine. Richard looked surprised. Just like that? Just like that. I'm not here to take anything from your family, Mr. Blake. I'm here because I love your daughter. A legal document doesn't change that. Arya was staring at him. You don't have to do this. I know, but I want to. Mason looked at Richard. Get your lawyers to draft it. I'll sign whatever you need as long as Arya gets what she asked for. Richard studied him for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not warmth exactly, but maybe the faintest hint of respect. Very well, Richard said. I'll have the post-nup drafted. Arya, you can start back at the office next Monday if you choose. Connor will fill you in on current projects. Connor looked relieved. Welcome back, sis. Arya still looked stunned. That's it? We're done? For now. Richard stood. I still think you're making a mistake, but it's your mistake to make. How paternal of you. Richard's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. I'll be in touch about family dinner next month. You'll both attend. It wasn't a question, but Arya nodded anyway. We'll be there. Richard and Connor left, leaving Mason and Arya alone in the conference room. I can't believe you agreed to a post-nup, Arya said. I can't believe you're going back to work for your father. We're both making compromises? That's what marriage is, apparently, compromising and hoping it works out. Arya laughed, the sound a little hysterical. We just went to court to prove our marriage is real, and now we're signing documents assuming it might end. This is insane. Everything about us is insane. Why stop now? She kissed him then, fierce and grateful. When they broke apart, she said, Let's go get our daughter and go home. Home. The word felt right. Picking up Ellie from the neighbors felt like returning to Earth after being in space. She launched herself at both of them, chattering about the snacks she'd had and the cartoons she'd watched, blissfully unaware of the legal battle that had determined her future. Did you have fun at your meeting? She asked. It was productive, Arya said, catching Mason's eye over Ellie's head. That's boring. Can we have pizza for dinner? Yeah, Elle. We can have pizza. They ordered from the good place, the one that was too expensive for regular nights but felt appropriate for celebrating. Sat around the dining table with grease-stained paper plates and talked about nothing important. Ellie's upcoming field trip, a weird customer at the warehouse, the neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking, normal life, the kind Mason had barely believed was possible a few months ago. After Ellie was in bed, Mason and Arya collapsed on the couch, exhausted. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Arya admitted. What do you mean? We won. The marriage is legitimate. My father backed down. Rebecca can't challenge custody again without new evidence. Everything worked out. She looked at him. That doesn't happen in my life. Things don't just work out. Maybe they do now. Or maybe we're in the eye of the hurricane and the second half is coming. Mason pulled her closer. Then we'll deal with it when it comes, together. Together, she echoed, like she was testing the word. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the TV playing something neither of them was watching. Mason? Arya's voice was quiet. Yeah? Earlier in the courtroom, when you said you loved me, did you mean it? Yes. Even though I'm difficult and controlling and terrible at relationships? Even though, maybe because of it. He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. You're also brave and smart, and you love my daughter like she's yours. The difficult parts come with the package. I'm going to mess this up sometimes. I'm going to revert to being my father's daughter, cold and strategic and closed off. And I'm going to be too proud and stubborn and probably say the wrong thing at the wrong time. We're both going to mess up. That's not an if, it's a when. So what do? We forgive each other. We try again. We don't give up just because it's hard. Arya was quiet for a moment. I've never had anyone fight for me before. Not really. My family fights about me, but not for me. There's a difference. I know. You really meant it when you said you'd sign that post-nup? Every word. You know it basically says if we divorce, you walk away with nothing from my family money? Good. I don't want anything from your family money. Mason shifted to face her properly. I want you and Ellie and this weird little life we're building. That's it. Most people would think you're crazy for turning down access to that much money. Most people didn't grow up the way I did. Money solves some problems, sure, but it creates others. I'd rather have less money and actual happiness. Arya's eyes were bright. I don't know if I've ever been actually happy. I don't even know what that's supposed to feel like. What does this feel like? Mason gestured around the apartment. Right now. Being here with me and Ellie. She thought about it. Safe. Like I can breathe, like I don't have to perform or be anyone except myself. That's a good start. Is that what happiness is? Just feeling safe? I think it's part of it. The other part is wanting to stay. Not because you have to, but because you genuinely want to be here. I want to be here, Arya said immediately. Then, more softly, that's new for me. Usually I'm already planning my exit. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. They kissed, slow and sweet, and for the first time it felt like they had all the time in the world. No hearing looming, no investigation, no contract expiration date. Just them. The weekend passed in a haze of normalcy. Saturday they took Ellie to the park. Sunday they did laundry and argued about whether to alphabetize the spice rack. Monday morning, Arya dressed for her first day back at Blake Industries in 5 months. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her blazer for the 3rd time. You look great, Mason said from the bed. I look terrified. That too, but also great. She turned to face him. What if I can't do this? What if my father uses my coming back as an opportunity to undermine everything we just fought for? Then you quit again. You have options now, Arya. You're not trapped. It doesn't feel that way. I know, but it's true. Mason got up, crossed to her, fixed her collar that didn't need fixing. You're going to walk in there and remind everyone why you're good at this. And when your father inevitably does something controlling or frustrating, you're going to set a boundary and come home to us. That's the deal. When did you become the reasonable one in this relationship? Someone has to be. You're too busy being brilliant and terrifying. She smiled despite her nerves. I'm not terrifying. You absolutely are. I'm a little scared of you right now. Good. I'll need that energy for facing Connor's smug face. Arya left for the office at 8. Mason got Ellie ready for preschool, dropped her off, headed to the warehouse. Everything felt surreal in its ordinariness. Like they'd fought so hard to get here that he'd expected life to feel different. But it was just Tuesday, just work and responsibilities and the regular rhythm of days. His phone buzzed around 10. A text from Arya. Connor's project is a disaster. I'm already fixing things and I've been here 2 hours. Then, I missed this. Mason smiled and pocketed his phone. That evening, Arya came home energized in a way he hadn't seen before. She talked through dinner about infrastructure projects and investment opportunities and things Mason only half understood but loved watching her explain. Ellie listened with the solemn attention of someone who had no idea what was being discussed but liked the energy. Miss Arya's happy, Ellie observed after Arya went to take a call in the other room. Yeah, baby, she is. Because of her job? Partly, but also because she's where she wants to be. Mason looked at his daughter. You know how you love preschool because you get to paint and play with your friends? Yeah, it's like that. Miss Arya gets to build things and solve problems. That makes her happy. Oh. Ellie processed this. I like when she's happy. She smiles more. Me too, Elle. The first month back at Blake Industries was rocky. Richard kept his word about letting Arya choose her projects, but he couldn't help himself from offering suggestions that were really directives. Arya pushed back. They argued. She came home frustrated more than once, but she also came home energized, engaged, more herself than Mason had ever seen her. I forgot how good I am at this, she said one night, sprawled on the couch with her laptop, reviewing proposals. You're good at a lot of things. Name 3. Making Ellie laugh, arguing with your father, drinking terrible coffee without complaining. Arya threw a pillow at him. Those are not skills. They are to me. She smiled, went back to her laptop. Mason watched her work, feeling something settle in his chest. This was it. This was the life they were building. Imperfect and complicated and nothing like he'd imagined when he'd first opened that email months ago. But it was theirs. Rebecca's next supervised visitation with Ellie happened on a Saturday. Mason dropped her off at the family center, same routine as before, but this time Ellie went more willingly, chattering to the supervisor about a project she'd done at school. Rebecca was already inside. She smiled when she saw Ellie, but her eyes found Mason immediately. Can we talk? She asked. Just for a minute? Lynn, the supervisor, nodded. I'll get Ellie settled. You two can talk in the hallway. Outside, Rebecca looked uncomfortable. I heard about the hearing, the annulment petition. Of course you did. I didn't know Richard Blake was going to do that. If I had, I would have... She stopped. I'm not sure what I would have done, but I wouldn't have encouraged it. You testified that our marriage was suspicious. I testified honestly. It was suspicious. The timing, the circumstances. You have to admit that. I don't have to admit anything to you, Rebecca. She flinched. Fair. I probably deserve that. Probably? Definitely. Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself. Look, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but I need to know that Ellie's actually okay. That this whole situation isn't confusing or hurting her. She's fine. Better than fine. She's happy. With your wife, Arya? Yes. Does she... Rebecca's voice caught. Does she call her mom? There it was, the real question. No, Mason said. She calls her Miss Arya, and Arya doesn't push for anything else. She knows Ellie has a mother. Who abandoned her. Your words, not mine. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I made a mistake walking out. I was young and stupid, and I thought I wanted freedom more than I wanted to be a mother. And by the time I realized I was wrong, you'd moved on, built a life, found someone who could be what I couldn't. Arya's not replacing you, isn't she? She lives with Ellie, takes care of her, probably knows her better than I do now. Mason couldn't argue with that. It was true. What do you want me to say, Rebecca? That there's still room for you in Ellie's life? There is. That's why you have visitation, but you don't get to show up after years of barely trying and expect to be her primary parent. That's not how this works. I know. Rebecca wiped her eyes. I'm not trying to take her from you anymore. The custody thing, that was Marcus pushing me, saying we could provide better. But he doesn't know Ellie, doesn't love her. He just wants the appearance of the perfect family. And you're figuring that out now? I've known it for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. She looked toward the visitation room. I'm going to break up with him. That's your business. I know, I'm trying to be honest. About all of it. I don't deserve to be Ellie's primary parent. You do. You and Arya both. But I want to be part of her life, a real part, not just supervised visits twice a month. Mason studied her, looking for the angle, the manipulation, found only genuine regret. Prove it, he said. Show up, consistently. Don't cancel visits, don't disappear when it's inconvenient. Actually be her mother instead of just saying you want to be. I will. I promise. We'll see. He left her standing in the hallway and went to say goodbye to Ellie. His daughter was already playing with blocks, Rebecca hovering nearby, looking hopeful and terrified. Be good, Elle, Mason said. I will. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, baby. On the drive home, he called Arya. How'd it go? She asked. Weird. Rebecca wants to be more involved, says she's breaking up with Marcus. Do you believe her? I don't know. Maybe? Mason navigated through traffic. Part of me wants to believe people can change. The other part remembers how many times she's let Ellie down. Both can be true. People can change and still mess up. Arya paused. How do you feel about her being more involved? Conflicted. Ellie should have a relationship with her mother, but I don't trust Rebecca not to hurt her again. So we stay cautious, let her prove herself before we give her more access. We. Mason's chest tightened. When did you become Ellie's protective co-parent? Sometime between helping her with homework and threatening to fight anyone who makes her sad. It kind of happened without me noticing. You love her. Yeah, I do. Arya said it simply, like it was obvious. Is that weird, that I love your daughter? No, it's perfect. Even though I'm not her biological mother, or even her stepmother really, since we started this whole thing fake, especially because of that, you chose to love her. That matters more than biology. Arya was quiet for a moment. I never thought I'd be someone's mother. Never wanted it. But with Ellie, it doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a privilege. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have both of you, Mason pulled into their building's garage, parked next to Arya's car that was already there, rode the elevator up to their apartment, found Arya in the kitchen, making lunch. She looked up when he entered, smiled. Hey. Hey yourself. He kissed her, just because he could, because she was there, and she was his, and this was real. Ellie's at visitation for another 2 hours, Arya said. Want to actually go on a date, like a real married couple? We've never been on a date. I know, seems like something we should fix. They ended up at a small cafe 3 blocks away, sitting outside in the autumn sunshine. Ordered sandwiches and coffee, and talked about everything and nothing. Mason told her about a guy at work who kept trying to teach him Spanish. Arya told him about a meeting where Connor had accidentally insulted their father, and everyone had to pretend not to notice. This is nice, Mason said. What is? This, sitting here, pretending we're normal people. We are normal people. Normal people don't start their marriage with a contract and a court case. Arya laughed. Fair. But we're working toward normal. That has to count for something. A woman at the next table was staring at them. Mason noticed, tensed slightly. What? Arya asked. Nothing, just that woman's watching us. Arya glanced over casually. Probably recognizes me from somewhere. My family's pretty well known. Does that bother you? People watching? Used to. I hated the attention, the expectations. She reached across the table, took his hand. But right now I don't care. Let them watch. The simple declaration felt revolutionary. They finished lunch and walked back to the apartment hand in hand, picked up Ellie from visitation together, made dinner as a family, did bath time and bedtime and all the small rituals that made up their life. That night, lying in bed with Arya curled against him, Mason felt something he hadn't felt in years. Content. Not happy in the explosive temporary way. Not excited or passionate or any of the big emotions. Just content. Satisfied with where he was and who he was with. You're thinking loud, Arya murmured sleepily. Sorry. What about? How much has changed in 3 months? Good change or bad change? Good. Definitely good. He kissed her forehead. Thank you. For what? For that email. For the crazy proposal. For being stubborn enough to fight for this even when it was hard. Thank you for taking a chance on a controlling rich girl with family issues. Anytime. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, both marveling at how something that started as a lie had become the most honest thing in their lives. The postnuptial agreement arrived 2 weeks later. Mason sat at the dining table with the document spread in front of him, Arya beside him, both reading through the dense legal language. This basically says you get nothing if we divorce, Arya said flatly. I know. Not the apartment, not any business assets, not even spousal support. I'm aware. Mason, this is insane. You're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. Not everything, just what we built together. Your family money existed before me. I don't have a claim to it. The law says otherwise. The law also said our marriage might be fraud. I'm not super interested in what the law says right now. Mason found the signature line. Your father wants this. It costs me nothing to give it to him. It costs you legal protection. From what? From you divorcing me and leaving me destitute? He looked at her. If we get divorced, it'll be because one of us did something unforgivable. In that case, I don't want your money. I just want to move on. And if I do something unforgivable, you'd walk away with nothing. Then I deserve to walk away with nothing for being stupid enough to marry someone who'd do something unforgivable. He picked up the pen. This is a non-issue, Arya. Stop worrying about it. I'm worrying because you're being cavalier about your future. I'm being practical. This document makes your father feel better and costs me nothing I actually want. That's called a win-win. Arya grabbed the pen before he could sign. At least let me add a clause, something that protects you if things go south. Like what? Like, if we have kids together, you get child support. If the marriage lasts more than 5 years, you get a settlement, something. We're negotiating my hypothetical divorce settlement. I'm protecting you from your own stubbornness. Mason couldn't help but smile. You realize this is insane, right? We're arguing about how to divide assets we don't have from a divorce that isn't happening. Better to have it in writing now than fight about it later. Fine. Add whatever clauses make you feel better. Then I'll sign it and we can move on with our lives. Arya called Margaret, who added protective clauses that Mason didn't bother reading closely. Something about escalating settlements based on marriage duration. Something else about child custody and support. Details that felt theoretical and distant. He signed it on a Tuesday afternoon, Arya watching like she expected him to change his mind at the last second. Done, he said, pushing the document back across the table. Happy? Not particularly, but at least you're protected now. From you taking advantage of me. From life being unfair, which it usually is. The signed post-nup went to Richard Blake's lawyers. A week later, Arya got an email from her father. Terms accepted. Welcome back to the family. She showed it to Mason, expression unreadable. How do you feel? He asked. Like I just sold my soul but got a decent price for it. You can still back out. Tell him to shove his compromise. No, this is the right move. Frustrating, but right. She set down her phone. Besides, the projects I'm working on are actually interesting, and Connor's less insufferable when we're on the same team. High praise. For me? Yeah, it is. That Friday, they attended their first official Blake family dinner as an acknowledged couple. Mason wore the suit David had loaned him months ago, now properly tailored to actually fit. Arya wore a dress that probably cost more than Mason's car, but looked incredible. Ellie stayed with the neighbor, despite her protests that she wanted to come to the fancy dinner. Next time, Arya had promised, when Grandpa Richard remembers how to act like a human being around children. The dinner was at the Blake family home, a sprawling estate that made Mason feel like he'd walked onto a movie set. Richard greeted them at the door with stiff formality. Catherine was warmer, or at least less actively cold. Connor actually seemed glad to see them. Welcome to the circus, Connor muttered as they walked to the dining room. Dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as Mason expected. Richard asked pointed questions about Mason's work that sounded polite but felt like tests. Catherine made vague comments about redecorating and charity events. Connor tried to diffuse tension with jokes that mostly landed flat, but Arya held Mason's hand under the table, defended him when Richard got too pointed, made it clear that they were a unit. And slowly, painfully, Richard seemed to accept it. Your warehouse work, Richard said over dessert. Is that long-term? Or are you pursuing other opportunities? It pays the bills and gives me time with Ellie. That's enough for now. But surely you have ambitions, plans for advancement. Dad, Arya said warningly, I'm asking a question. Surely Mason can answer for himself. Mason met Richard's eyes. My ambition is to be a good father and a good husband. If that comes with a warehouse job, fine. If something better comes along, also fine. But I'm not chasing money or status. I've seen what that does to people. The implication was clear. Richard's expression hardened. Mason doesn't mean, Arya started. I know what he means. Richard set down his fork. And he's not entirely wrong. I've prioritized business over family more times than I can count. It's cost me relationships with both my children. He looked at Arya. I'm trying to do better, accept that my daughter made a choice I don't understand, but respect that it's hers to make. The admission stunned everyone into silence. Thank you, Arya said finally. That's all I've ever wanted, for you to respect my choices. I'm working on it. Richard's expression softened slightly. You're good at your job, Arya. Better than I gave you credit for. The infrastructure project you took over from Connor is ahead of schedule and under budget. Connor's initial plan was a disaster. Hey, Connor protested weakly. It was. You know it was. Arya smiled at her brother. But I fixed it. That's what I do. That's what we do, Richard corrected. As a family, as a company. He looked at Mason. I still don't understand what my daughter sees in you, but she's happy, genuinely happy, and that's more than I've seen from her in years. So, thank you for whatever you're doing right. It wasn't exactly a warm endorsement, but coming from Richard Blake, it was practically a speech. You're welcome, Mason said carefully. The rest of dinner passed with slightly less tension. Catherine asked about Ellie, sounding genuinely interested. Connor told stories about office mishaps that even Richard laughed at. Arya relaxed incrementally, her hand still in Mason's. Driving home, Arya was quiet. That was exhausting, she said finally. Yeah, but it went better than expected. Your father almost complimented me. I'm shocked. He did compliment you, in his weird, backhanded way. Arya leaned her head against the window. I never thought I'd have this. Both of my lives existing in the same space, family and marriage and work all coexisting without one destroying the others. Is it what you wanted? It's better than what I wanted, because I didn't think it was possible. She looked at him. Thank you for tonight, for putting up with my father's interrogation and my mother's passive aggression and all of it. That's what family dinners are, right? Mutual suffering in formal wear. Arya laughed. Pretty much. They picked up Ellie, who was half asleep and grumpy about being woken up, carried her up to the apartment and put her directly into bed, stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her sleep. We're doing okay at this, right? Arya whispered. At what? Being parents, being partners, all of it. Yeah, we're doing okay. Just okay? Mason pulled her close. We're doing great, better than great. We're figuring it out as we go, and that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Arya relaxed against him. I love you. The words still sounded new in her mouth, like she was testing them out, but they were real. I love you too. They stood there in Ellie's doorway, arms around each other, both marveling at the strange and wonderful path that had led them here. From a desperate email to a business arrangement to a legal battle to this, standing in a home they'd built together, watching a child they both loved sleep, feeling something that looked a lot like happiness. It wasn't perfect. They still argued about stupid things. Arya still reverted to being controlling when she was stressed. Mason still got too stubborn when he felt cornered. But they worked through it. They forgave each other. They chose each other every single day. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months later, Mason stood in the kitchen of their apartment, the same one they'd moved into under a contract that no longer existed, watching Arya help Ellie with a school project about families. They were cutting out photos and gluing them onto poster board. Ellie's tongue stuck out in concentration. Arya's hand steadying hers when the scissors got tricky. This is you and Daddy, Ellie said, pointing to a photo from last month's trip to the beach. And this is me. And this is you, Miss Arya. You can call me Arya, you know, Arya said gently. Or Mom, if you want. Whatever feels right. Ellie considered this seriously. Can I call you Mama Arya? Because I have Mommy Rebecca, but you're different. Arya's eyes went bright. Yeah, baby, you can call me Mama Arya. Okay, Mama Arya. Ellie said it like she was trying it on. Then she grinned and went back to gluing photos. Mason had to turn away, pretending to be very interested in the coffee pot. His throat was too tight to speak. Arya found him a few minutes later while Ellie was in the bathroom washing glue off her hands. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just that was a big moment. She doesn't have to call me that if it's weird for you. It's not weird. It's perfect. Mason pulled her close. You're her mother in every way that matters. She knows it. I know it. Now she has a name for it. I never thought I'd be someone's mom. Never wanted to be. But with her, Arya's voice caught. I can't imagine my life without her. Without either of you. Good. Because you're stuck with us. Forever. At least until Ellie goes to college. After that we can renegotiate. Arya laughed and kissed him, and Ellie came running back demanding they finish her project before bedtime. Rebecca's visits had become more consistent. Every other weekend, no supervision needed anymore. She'd broken up with Marcus like she'd promised. Started therapy. Actually showed up when she said she would. It wasn't perfect. She still sometimes said the wrong thing or made promises she couldn't quite keep. But she was trying, really trying. She asked if Ellie could spend a weekend at her place, Mason told Arya one night. Just the two of them, no visitation center. What did you say? That I'd think about it, talk to you. It's your decision, Mason. She's your daughter. She's our daughter, and I want your opinion. Arya was quiet for a moment. I think Ellie should have a relationship with her mother, a real one, not just supervised visits and surface conversations. If Rebecca's proven she's stable, then yeah, let them have a weekend. You're not worried? Terrified. But that's not a good enough reason to say no. Arya met his eyes. Kids need their parents, all of them, even the imperfect ones who mess up sometimes. So Ellie spent a weekend with Rebecca, came back happy, chattering about the museum they'd visited and the pancakes they'd made. And Mason realized that maybe families could be bigger than he'd thought. That Ellie having two mothers didn't diminish either of them. Work at Blake Industries had stabilized into something Arya actually enjoyed. She and Connor were running a sustainable housing project together. Richard still tried to micromanage, but Arya had learned to push back without it becoming a war. Catherine had started inviting them to lunch, just the three of them, Arya, Mason, and Ellie, building something that almost resembled a normal grandmother relationship. Mason had taken a supervisor position at the warehouse. Better pay, better hours, actual benefits. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and it let him be present for Ellie's school events and family dinners, and all the small moments that made up a life. "I've been thinking," Arya said one Sunday morning. They were in bed, lazy and content, while Ellie watched cartoons in the living room. "About renewing our vows." Mason turned to look at her. "Why?" "We're already married." "Because the first time was a courthouse and a contract. I want to do it again, for real this time. With Ellie there and our families and everyone who matters, I want to marry you because I choose you, not because I need you." "You don't need me?" "I mean, I do need you, but not in the desperate way I did before. Now I need you because my life is better with you in it, because you make me laugh and call me on my controlling tendencies and love our daughter like she's the center of the universe." Arya's voice was soft. "I want to stand in front of everyone we know and promise to choose you every day." "Is that crazy?" "Probably, but I like it." "Yeah? Yeah, let's get married again. Do it right this time." They planned it for the fall, a year and a half after that first desperate courthouse ceremony. Nothing extravagant, just family and close friends in the park where they'd taken Ellie 100 times. Simple and real and theirs. The ceremony was on a Saturday in October, leaves turning gold and red around them. Ellie was the flower girl, taking her job incredibly seriously. Rebecca was there sitting in the back with tears in her eyes. Connor was Mason's best man, having somehow become a genuine friend over the past year. Margaret Chen officiated because why not? Richard Blake walked Arya down the aisle, his expression unreadable until he placed her hand in Mason's and whispered something that made Arya's eyes go wet. "What did he say?" Mason asked later. "That he was wrong about you, that you're exactly what I needed even if it took him too long to see it." They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promised to keep choosing each other, keep fighting for their imperfect family, keep building the life they'd stumbled into by accident but were now creating on purpose. When Mason kissed his wife, his real wife, chosen and chosen again, Ellie cheered louder than anyone. The reception was in their apartment, cramped and chaotic and perfect. People spilled into the hallway. Someone made a toast that went on too long. Ellie fell asleep on the couch at 8, exhausted from excitement. Mason found Arya on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Hey, wife," he said. "Hey, husband. Having regrets?" "Not even one." She leaned back against him. "You know what's funny? A year and a half ago, I was so convinced that marriage was a trap, a prison, something that would destroy who I was. And now? Now I think I didn't know who I was until I let myself be part of something bigger than myself." She turned to face him. "You and Ellie didn't complete me or whatever romantic nonsense people say, but you gave me space to figure out who I wanted to be. And turns out, I wanted to be someone's wife, someone's mother, someone who builds a life instead of just running from one. That's pretty profound for someone who's had 3 glasses of champagne. I'm a deep drunk." Mason laughed and pulled her close. Inside, their apartment was full of people who'd watched them fight for this, who doubted and believed and supported and challenged. It was messy and loud, and nothing like the quiet, controlled life Arya had been raised in or the desperate, struggling existence Mason had been trapped in. It was so much better. Later, after everyone had left and Ellie was tucked into her pink bedroom and the apartment was finally quiet, Mason and Arya stood in the wreckage of the party. "We should clean this up," Arya said without moving. "We should." Neither of them moved. "I love you," Mason said. "I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you for who you were when we met and who you've become and whoever you're going to be next. I love you too, even though you're stubborn and you make terrible coffee and you never put your socks in the hamper. I'm working on the socks thing. You're really not." They stood there in their messy apartment, in their imperfect life, and they were happy. Because that's the thing about family. It's not about perfection. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other on the hard days, not just the easy ones. It's about building something together that's stronger than what either person could create alone. Mason had learned that family isn't just biology or legal documents or carefully planned arrangements. It's the people who show up when you're at your worst and love you anyway. It's the daughter who calls two women mom in different ways and loves them both. It's the ex-wife who's learning to be a better mother. It's the father-in-law who's learning to respect boundaries. It's the wife who started as a stranger with a desperate proposal and became home. And Arya had learned that love isn't a trap or a weakness. It's the bravest thing she'd ever done, letting people in, building a life with someone, choosing to stay when everything in her past told her to run. It's messy and complicated and terrifying. It's also the best decision she'd ever made. They cleaned up the apartment together, working in comfortable silence. Put Ellie to bed one more time when she woke up confused about why her room was dark. Collapsed into their own bed, exhausted and content. "Hey, Mason," Arya said in the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you for taking a chance on that crazy email. Thank you for sending it. Even though it was manipulative and desperate and probably the worst proposal anyone's ever received, especially because of that. It brought you to us." Arya snuggled closer. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We don't have an expiration date anymore. No contract ending, no exit strategy. Just us, figuring it out as we go. For better or worse. For richer or poorer. In sickness and health. Until we're old and gray and still arguing about who forgot to buy milk." Mason smiled in the dark. "I can't wait." And he meant it. Because sometimes the best things in life start with a lie that becomes the truth. Sometimes family is something you build, not something you're born into. Sometimes love shows up in an email from a stranger and changes everything. Sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you get a second chance to choose the life you want instead of settling for the one you have. Mason and Arya chose each other. They chose Ellie. They chose the messy, complicated, beautiful life they'd built from a business arrangement and desperation and hope. And they lived it fully, imperfectly, and without regret. That's all any family can really do.